Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good afternoon, everybody. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. Now, coming up, we will have the latest after the tragic death of 3 young boys who fell through a frozen lake in the West Midlands. The Shadow Health Secretary has warned ministers they can't keep relying on the army to solve what he's calling the government's problems. After Downing Street said the military could be drafted in to help during NHS strikes, that's as a last resort. And reports today that some holiday camps across the UK could be used to house migrants in the off-season. Tragic news this afternoon as police confirm the deaths of 3 boys under the age of 12 who fell through ice into a lake in the West Midlands. A 4th boy, who's 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital after being pulled from the water by emergency crews, including a police officer who tried to punch through the ice during the rescue efforts. We'll bring you the latest on that shortly. We are expecting some developments whilst we're on air. But also this hour, Conservative MP Tobias Ellwood says relying on the armed forces to fill the gaps left by strikes will place a huge burden on the military. Can we keep relying on our army to keep us afloat? A meeting of COBRA, the government's emergency response committee, is taking place this afternoon, but Labour are launching an urgent question to find out more about the government's response to strike action. We are possibly going to be taking that live with you. We'll keep you up to date on all of that. And get a load of this, ladies and gents. Could disused holiday parks across the UK be used to house Channel migrants? We're all going on a migrant holiday. Anyway, with reports it's being considered by the government to cut the almost £6 million. I think it might be about £7 million a day now. Anyway, being spent on the hotels as the cold weather draws in. What do you make of all of that? I have got 2 main topics I would like your views on today. GBViews at gbnews.uk. The travel chaos. It took me 12.5 hours on a train, 3 tube drives and also an actual drive to get into work today. So the least you can do is sit and listen to me. But anyway, and also as well your views on the migrant holiday camp situation. GBViews at gbnews.uk. But now it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It's 3 minutes past 3. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. 3 boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull on Sunday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11, were in cardiac arrest when they came out of the water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. 1 police officer was treated for mild hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children. They were taken to hospital but have since been released. The West Midlands Fire Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else has fallen into the water.
We have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing. But until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Yellow warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. It was the coldest night of the year on Sunday, reaching below -15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties have been felt in the east and south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains telling people not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted have reopened after closing their runways on Sunday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. Chancellor Jeremy Hunt has warned there's a tough road ahead, despite the fact that Britain's economy grew between September and October. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show a 0.5% increase in GDP in the month. However, it has still shrunk over the last 3 months. Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the numbers underline the government's failure to grow the economy. Mr Hunt says the government has a plan.
These figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
The Foreign Secretary has vowed to forge new partnerships beyond the UK's traditional allies. In his first key speech in the role, James Cleverly celebrated Britain's traditional alliances, but promised to build relations with influential Asian, Latin American and African countries. He said he'll make a long-term effort to maintain old friendships and build new ones.
In the coming decades, an ever greater share of the world economy, and therefore the world's power, will be in the hands of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That reality has been evident for some time, but I am not convinced that British diplomacy has fully caught up. My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun.
Meanwhile, the International Trade Secretary will arrive in India later as the UK strives to restore a free trade deal. Kemi Badenoch will meet Indian ministers and business leaders in New Delhi for the first formal round of talks since July. The negotiations are expected to focus on cutting tariffs and opportunities for UK financial and legal services. The government is still in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with India after the target of securing a deal by October was missed. The second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing people of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to. He was also heard saying that he wondered what would have happened if he hadn't left the royal family when he did. The trailer for the last 3 episodes, which will be released on Thursday, has been unveiled after the first set was released last week.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, we've got an eclectic mix of stuff coming for you on this show today. But we do start this hour with tragic news, unfortunately, that 3 boys aged 11, 10 and 8 have died after falling through ice on a frozen lake in the West Midlands. Another child is still said to be very poorly in hospital. Here's the latest from the Superintendent of West Midlands Police, Richard Harris.
Our officers were quick to respond at the scene yesterday afternoon, and having worked very closely with our colleagues from other emergency services, went into the lake itself to help rescue the children and to try and assist them as quickly as we possibly could. We've worked very closely with our colleagues in West Midlands Fire Service and also in West Midlands Ambulance Service, and this has been a real joint effort. It is incredibly sad that we do not have any better news for you today regarding yesterday afternoon's incident.
Yeah, this is the tragic human side of the quite extreme weather that we've been seeing recently. We're going to be talking about that rather a lot, especially in the context of travel chaos, but we're sticking with this tragedy for the meantime because the emergency services are warning people to stay away now from open water, especially children, and it's terrible, isn't it? You want children to go outside and play in the snow and play in the ice and have a good time, but at the same time, we've got to make sure that everybody's completely safe. They're being warned to stay away, especially from open water after this tragic accident at Babs Mill Lake in Solihull. And joining me now is GB News' West Midlands reporter, Jack Carson, who is there for us. Jack, what's the latest?
Well, Patrick, the latest is this operation of searching this lake continues. Of course, we heard in the press conference that Superintendent Richard Harris saying that there was no immediate recognition that there were possibly still people in this lake. There had nobody come forward, no witnesses reporting missing people that might have been involved in this incident. But as he said, just to make sure that they're still searching this lake, we've seen out this afternoon police on boats and patrols going through the water we understand, with a thermal imaging camera through the water to see if they can find any evidence of any more people that may have been involved in this incident. And West Midlands Police are calling for people to come forward. You go into their website, West Midlands Police website, to come forward if you have any information. It doesn't need to be that you witnessed the incident. It can be that you saw maybe the boys around the lake 30 minutes before the incident happened, because they're just trying to understand how many people possibly might have been involved here. Of course, we know that they've pulled 4 people out of this lake yesterday afternoon. It was 2:34 p.m. when police came and got the call from a local here about the incident that had happened. Minutes later, a policeman and members of the public charged into the water. The policeman, without any protective clothing, just with normal police uniform, trousers, boots, no protective equipment, charged into the lake, breaking ice with his bare hands. They were taken to hospital, suffering minor hypothermia. They've now been released from hospital and are on the road to a full recovery. So they're just asking for police are asking for witnesses, anything that may give them any more information about this case. They're not treating it as a criminal investigation at the minute. They're supporting the families as they continue, and the community is now starting to come together, laying tributes and candles here at the scene.
Jack, thank you very much. Our Carson there, bringing us the latest from Solihull. As that search operation does, of course, continue, but it remains to be seen if there are any more people involved with that. Yes, and our thoughts go out clearly for all of those affected. 3 young boys tragically died, another one in critical condition. But at the same time as well, I think important to recognise the heroic attempts there by police officers, not wearing any protective gear, going there, punching through the ice, etc. Police officers often get a lot of stick for not acting, and that clearly is very much a hero there. But just a slightly different take now on the freezing weather conditions. It has caused widespread travel disruption throughout the UK. People don't need to tell me anything about that, because I ended up getting a 12.5-hour train, 3 tubes and a car drive into work today. So there we go. Who says that Britain doesn't handle a bit of snow well? Anyway, trains have been delayed. Motorists warned to take care after several motorway accidents. Passengers face delays and cancellations at airports. Yes, after snow, ice and freezing fog swept Britain. Anyway, flights have since resumed, but further cancellations and delays are possible. A yellow weather warning is in place for much of the UK, with disruption set to continue as we head into the evening rush hour. I know a lot of people will be watching and listening to this now, planning their journey home. And joining me is the president of the AA, Edmund King, OBE. Thank you very much, Edmund. Great to have you on the show. Right, Edmund, look, would you just recommend that people try to stay off the roads, batten down the hatches, stay at home, glass of mulled wine, put a nice Christmas film on?
Well, it's obviously nice if you can do that, but we still realise there are many essential workers, hospital workers, postmen, AA patrols, etc., delivery people that do need to get out there. But I think for those that have got a choice, particularly in areas of the southeast and the southwest, I do think tonight will be particularly treacherous, Patrick. We saw last night on the M25, the northern section between junctions 23 and 25, many people stranded for hours.
Yes,
it was
Edmund,
basically
on that appears to me, and we can see footage of it there if people are watching on TV, a fundamental lack of gritting. We hear about councils all the time. They'll run a sweepstake to rename their gritter. We've had Gritty Gritty Bang Bang, Spready Mercury, Grit Me Baby One More Time. There's no gritting taking place there at all, is there? And surely this must make your life a living hell. The president of the AA, you're getting phone calls left, right and centre. If people had come out and gritted the roads and done their job, maybe you wouldn't be under so much pressure.
Well, indeed, it increases our breakdowns by 25, 30%. In fact, one of our recovery drivers got stuck amongst the carnage on the M25 last night. Now, National Highways do claim that they did grit it on Sunday afternoon, Sunday night. Difficult to know what happens. Sometimes if you grit it too early and the snow comes down, it doesn't have that effect. And obviously in the UK, most drivers don't have winter tyres. If you go to Sweden, Norway, Denmark, by law, they have to have winter tyres. But I think the main thing for drivers, and this might seem petty, but it's the best advice. If you are venturing out, make sure you have enough petrol or diesel or indeed electric charge. Because for those people that got stuck on the M25 for no fault of their own,
yes,
at least if you've got fuel, you can turn your engine on, put your heater on, and you can keep warm.
Well,
otherwise, elderly people could die in those sub-zero temperatures. So that is the first bit of advice. And then, you know, also, Patrick, check your car out beforehand, make sure it's roadworthy. And, you know, basic things, take a coat, take food, take drink. And know your location. The other thing, Patrick, many people in rural areas in the snow break down, they don't know where they are. There's a free app, What 3 Words? I don't know if you've heard of that. It divides the world into 57 trillion 3-meter squares. So you just click on the app, it tells you where you are, and you can tell the AA or indeed the emergency services, and it means people get to you more quickly.
It does indeed, and it is well worth actually checking that app out, What 3 Words. Look, thank you very, very much. I imagine you're a busy man, so I'll let you crack on dealing with the latest transport weather-related chaos. Edmund King OBE there, president of the AA. Now, I don't want to get too, morbid about the whole thing, but if you have been stuck on a road or, I don't know, even just some nice winter scenery, actually, get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, send us your pictures, send us your gripes, whether it's an email or a picture or indeed a video as well. Have the roads near you been gritted? I can't help but feel there is some kind of tragic irony involved in the people who decided they were going to get an electric car because they wanted to combat global warming, and then the electricity on that car runs out as a result of them being trapped in a snowstorm. My diesel will be fine. Anyway, joining me now is Councillor Darren Rodwell, who is a transport spokesperson for the Local Government Association. Well, you have a bit of explaining to do, don't you? Where's all the gritting gone?
Well, we can only do what we can do. We can't achieve miracles. We had a massive snowfall in a very short period of time. The salt will, when we put it out beforehand, work only as effectively as it can to a certain level.
Do you watch the weather reports, Darren? Do you watch the weather reports? The troll from Trondheim, I was talking about it all last week. We all knew it was coming. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came from the sky.
Patrick, I think you're being very dismissive to very hard-working frontline workers who have been gritting since the cold spill started over a week ago. 1.4 million tonnes of salt is stocked up, and we try and keep all the primary roads open. We can't do back roads, but I can assure you that our staff across all councils across the country are working as best they can with, lorries, tractors, quad bikes, snow blowers. We've even got street cleaners actually gritting as well to try and keep everything moving, because it isn't just the cars. We've got to worry about people walking on our streets as well. So we concentrate in primary areas where we best can, and we have to give our best judgment on how much we can put down at any one time.
Is there a grit? You're right. I was being a little bit facetious there. So, yes, I will give you that one. But you're talking to a bloke here who spent about 15 hours trying to get into work. So I will concede the fact that I'm more than my usual grumpy self today, actually. But is there a finite amount of grit in the country? How does it work? Can we donate to a grit bank or something? Because obviously a lot of people, as this troll from Trondheim continues to roar for the next few days, I mean, what are we going to run out? Is there a gritting shortage?
No, I mean, as I said, we have got 1.4 million tonnes stored already. What we've got to try and do is get round. Now, of course, that happens in many different ways, depending what the situation that council faces. I, in my East London borough, have 2 gritters that does the whole borough. Now, again, I've had teams out working round the clock for the last week, trying to keep all of our major roads open. Now, again, it's how does that work when people, and the AA were very clear there, do you really need to go out? Lots of people now can work from home, and I'm sorry to hear of a 15-hour traffic situation you found yourself in with different modes, but it shows that it really does cause a problem for the country, all we can do as local authorities is try and build and mitigate as best we can in the situation we find ourselves on. But please, there's hundreds of thousands of frontline workers doing their best trying to make sure you can go to work.
Going out in freezing conditions, exactly. And I suppose there will be a lot of people watching their TV or listening on their radio now who will question the merits of whether or not I should ever be allowed to come into work. So thank you very much. Councillor Darren Rodwell there, who's a transport spokesperson for the local government association. I couldn't help but feel as though when I was on the overnight train and I'm looking on my phone at pictures of, people in Norway or Canada, their country, functioning perfectly with massive snowdrifts over here, and I look outside, there's an inch of snow and the nation's ground to a halt. Although I was cheered slightly to see pictures on Twitter, videos on Twitter of people having a snowball fight across the platforms on a tube station. It's not all bad, people. It's not all bad. And it's pretty to look at. Anyway, you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, could the army be called in to drive ambulances as some health service staff prepare to strike? There's a lot to get stuck into here. Can the army actually keep our NHS afloat? Will the army not be busy tackling things like, border force or any of the other striking elements? And now forgive me here, because I know this might sound like a stupid question, but can the army actually step in and save lives? One would imagine they might be good with the old stabbing or shooting stuff. Are they good in a situation about an old lady's had a heart attack and there's no ambulance to get to her? I don't know. We're going to answer all of those burning questions very, very shortly. We're also going to be talking about some other top topics today as the cold weather draws in. Did you know that migrants are going to be housed, potentially, in holiday camps? Who'd have thought that? Anyway, I'll be back in a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. Right, now, as we all know, we're facing a barrage of strikes, aren't we? Everywhere you look, there's a strike. Although it is hard to tell at the moment because of the snow. Nothing's working anyway, so extra strike action. But one of the big ones for us, and I think one of the big ones for everyone, frankly, is, of course, what's going on in our NHS, or what's not going on, some people would say. Nurses' strikes we've got as well, potentially, when it comes to ambulance drivers, paramedics, ambulance workers, etc., etc., etc. And the solution always appears to be, well, let's just bring the army in. Let's just bring in the army. Well, first and foremost, the army often is paid a lot less than the people who are striking. The army is, of course, not allowed to strike. It is fundamentally not the army's job. And also, as well, can they do it? Now, I know the army can pretty much turn their hand to anything, but in reality, is it as easy as that? From Wednesday, we're going to be seeing strikes with the NHS. They're due to hold strike action on Thursday as well. The government has said that around 2,000 army staff, civil servants and volunteers are now training for various roles. These include things like ambulance driving or firefighters as well. I forgot about them. They're off. Joining me now is ex-SAS trooper Big Phil Campion. Phil, thank you very much. Now, I am aware that the army can probably do just about anything, but are they prepared to, certainly when it comes to things like the NHS, fill the gap that will be left by the lack of paramedics?
I think they'll certainly be voluntold if they're not prepared. They'll definitely go and do it. They have no choice. Like I say, you've alluded to there, the army don't go on strike. So, yes, they'll be more than prepared. They'll be ready to do it. If they have to step in, they will. That's the way it is.
Presumably, when it comes just with the health stuff, there is more than a bit of first aid training involved in being in the army, Phil.
Absolutely. And to be fair, a lot of the techniques being used now by ambulance crews have been brought about by the years of conflict that we've just been through. So look, our medics are the best in the world. They will be to a very high standard. So, you know, the general public don't need to worry that they're going to get some lunatic turning up who just wants to fight everybody. That's not the case. We have some very, very talented medics within the military system. Some of the best.
Yeah, and it's going to be tricky to know whether or not they can actually fill the exact gap left by ambulance drivers and all of that, because it's more the behind-the-scenes stuff as well that will really grind the NHS down to a halt. It's all very well and good having someone who's been trained in the army to drive an ambulance and maybe help plug a wound or something like that, but if there aren't the call handlers there to get the ambulance there in the first place, or there aren't enough of them, or there aren't any nurses when they get there, that's a different kettle of fish. But, Phil, what's the mood like in the army about being asked to rope in? Because some people who are striking are actually angry that the army is, in a way, breaking their picket line by plugging this gap.
I'll tell you what, don't get angry at the army for plugging your gap, right? You've got ways and means of sorting stuff out. But the head shed, the ivory towers, the government in all this are not paying their... Be angry at them. Because they're the ones who aren't negotiating. They aren't the ones who aren't paying you. They're the ones who need to be spoken to. You know, private so-and-so that tipped up, do your job while you can't, or while you're striking, is not the guy to have a go at, or girl to have a go at either.
What's the mood like in the army generally, just having to fill in? Because it is the Christmas period, and they obviously weren't expecting this. So it's... And I dare say a lot of the people in the military who will be doing these jobs are possibly, anyway, on a lot less money than those who are striking.
Absolutely. Not to mention the fact that they've probably done a lot more work this year just by virtue of the fact that the army is so overstretched and they're always busy. And don't forget, you know, people would have probably made plans for Christmas. Everybody expects to do a duty now and again. But to be dumped in it by something like this isn't the greatest thing for morale. But that said, I'm sure the army will pull through it. It's disappointing. Nobody wants to give up their Christmas leave to do someone else's job, do they? You just wouldn't, would you?
Do you feel as though the army is letting on? I mean, people like me, just big mouths, go, so I'll bring the army in, but I don't really know what I'm talking about. You know, I mean, have we actually got the resources? Because I do also keep hearing about things like maybe a little bit of recruitment trouble in the army or morale issues maybe as well. I mean, can the army actually step in and do all of this stuff? Have you got the numbers?
I don't know what the figures are. I don't know what the numbers are. I do know, though, however, that every man or woman that's asked to step up to the plate will step up to the plate and will, to the best of their abilities, do the best that they can with what they've got. So in that respect, you don't have to worry. Whether or not they can cover everybody that walks out, it's a huge organisation, the NHS, probably larger than the army. I don't know what the figures are. So, you know, if they all go, there's going to be a massive problem, isn't there?
Yeah, no, absolutely, 100%. Look, Big Phil, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. Big Phil Campion there, ex-SAS trooper, just whizzing you through the fact that the army is being drafted in. It would appear, anyway, to pretty much cover loads of stuff. So you've got your ambulance drivers. They will be striking. I don't imagine the army will be brought in to actual to cover actual nurses. We've got firefighters as well, and all of that is coming your way very, very shortly. Although, partly, I wonder whether or not you'll feel a bit reassured if you see someone in army uniform marching towards you in your hour of need. I certainly would. Anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, and next up, and this is a big one, actually, I know it'll get a lot of you going, there are reports that the government is to use holiday camps to accommodate asylum seekers as a cheaper option to putting them up in hotels, potentially even student halls as well. What do you make of that as the cold nights draw in? I was out and about a little bit over the weekend. It was absolutely freezing. And one of the first things that strikes me is how lucky I am, first and foremost. I get to go home to somewhere relatively warm. I get to spend all day in a nice, warm studio. I have, thankfully, the ability to go and buy myself a nice new coat if I need to and wrap up and a new scarf. But, of course, loads of people don't. Loads of people line the streets. Homelessness is a massive issue. In fact, military homelessness as well. We just heard from an ex-SAS chap there. There are lots, thousands of homeless military veterans. But I do suppose if you come across the channel, you can get yourself in a holiday camp this winter. Your views, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Is it a good or is it a bad idea? First, though, it is time now for your latest headlines.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Your latest headlines this hour. We start with a story that 3 boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. One police officer was treated in hospital for hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children, but has since been released. West Midlands Fire and Rescue Service says the search of the lake is continuing to establish if anyone else fell into the water.
We have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing, but until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Meanwhile, yellow warnings for ice, fog and snow are in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. Last night was the coldest night of the year so far, reaching below -15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties caused by the freezing temperatures have been felt in the east and the south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains advising passengers not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted airports have both now reopened after closing their runways yesterday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. The second trailer for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing some of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to. He was also heard saying that he wondered what would have happened if he hadn't left the royal family when he did. The trailer for the latest 3 episodes, which will be released on Thursday, has been unveiled after the first set was released last week. Those are your latest news headlines. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Don't go anywhere. We're back in just a tick.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television and online, across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
My
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on
OK, I love a bit of breaking news here, and today is no different. We can cross live now to the House of Commons, where the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is questioning the Health Secretary on the government's preparedness for the NHS strikes. Let's have it.
Year's increase in full, meaning that over 1 million NHS staff have been given at least a £1,400 increase in their pay. And, Mr Speaker, that is on top of a 3% pay rise last year at a time when the pay was frozen across the wider public sector. But, Mr Speaker, the RCN, one of the unions taking action, is asking for an increase that is 5% above RPI. Now, based on the latest figures, that is an increase of 19.2%, or equivalent of 6.5% of the NHS budget. Now, to meet such demands, Mr Speaker, we would have to take money away from clearing the elective backlog the honourable gentleman references, something that no responsible government would wish to do. Now, throughout this period, Mr Speaker, we have always sought to have a balanced process. Now, those in the private sector will not be getting a 19% uplift, and there is a clear need to be fair to the wider economy. We've got to avoid inflationary pressures that would make us all poorer in the end. So, Mr Speaker, we'll continue to listen to colleagues' concerns, not just about pay, but about many other issues affecting the working lives of those in the NHS. We'll work with them to make those improvements in a range of areas, from working conditions to patient safety. Because we believe, Mr Speaker, there is so much that we can agree on. Strike action is in no one's best interest, and we'll keep working so the NHS continues to be there for those who need it most.
Chair of the Select Committee, Steve Bryan.
Mr Speaker, just with your indulgence, may I just send our heartfelt sympathies to the parents of the little boys who've lost their lives in the West Midlands overnight, and say thank you to the emergency services, many of whom will have been NHS emergency services, who I'm sure have done their best for those who they pulled out and those who they were unable to save. The Minister is right that we have an independent pay review process in this country, but it seems that we're coming to an interesting junction point on that. Either we believe in an independent pay review process or we don't. We can't be in a situation where everything's agreed until it's simply not, and then ministers are negotiating pay. That is not what ministers do. On patients, I'm glad the Minister mentioned at the end of his remarks, we must keep them as our focus. I have more information about my train services over the next few weeks than I do about health services. Is the Minister satisfied that patients have enough information about what is being affected and when, and how much that will impact on the backlog? Because I suspect none of this will help some of those workload pressures that are impacting our NHS.
Mr Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and I echo his comments on the tragic events in Solihull and the boys that lost their lives, and the heroic actions of those in the emergency services. He's also right to say that we have an independent pay review body. We either agree and accept that that is the process, or we don't. Now, on advice to the public, he's right, we have more to do in this space. Derogations are still being worked through, both with individual unions and trusts. Now, patients should continue to call 999 as normal if it is an emergency, if someone is seriously ill or injured. If they do not have life-threatening conditions, use NHS 111. Ambulances will still be responding to 999 calls. And if patients have appointments, please turn up unless advised to do so. But he's right to make the point about communications, and I'll be ramping this up when we know more about derogations.
SNP spokesperson, Steve.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Scotland's First Minister has managed in one day to do what the Tory government could not. Agree with the nursing unions to call off planned strikes for this month. These NHS workers are the backbone of these countries. If they don't work, the country doesn't work. And if the country isn't working, it's broken. Britain is broken, isn't it? And Brexit has broken Britain, hasn't it? The Tories won't negotiate, and the Labour opposition spokesperson is branded by the BMA as hostile to unions, while in Scotland the strikes are off, and they're off permanently. Mr Speaker, an offer of 7.5% has been negotiated and agreed, an 11.4% pay rise for the lowest across the board in NHS Scotland. Why is the UK government refusing to give a decent pay increase to public servants when they have all the financial power to do so?
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable gentleman for his question. My understanding is industrial action in Scotland has been suspended, not cancelled, as the honourable gentleman suggested, but they have made a considerably higher offer, partly because a politician has got involved in pay negotiations, directly in contrast to the independent pay review body. And it'll be interesting to see if the First Minister of Scotland is going to do this every single year and go against the recommendations of their pay review body. Perhaps the honourable gentleman would like to confirm, I appreciate you can't do it now, Mr Speaker, whether they've also looked at things like leave, working times. And I think it's important to stress one thing, Mr Speaker, that for every 1% increase on the agenda to change workforce, that equates to around £750 million. That is £750 million that will come out of the NHS budget that we won't be able to spend on things like tackling the elective backlog, which is so important to people up in the country.
We now come to tobacco.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Our military actually enjoy stepping in when the government department occasionally cannot manage, such as with flooding and so forth, or on the rare occasions that a strike may take place. But what we're seeing here this month is unprecedented, with so many sectors choosing to strike exactly at the same time. This places a huge burden on our armed forces. Could I ask the Minister, firstly, are all the units that may be required to mobilise, have they been informed already? And is it now time, if we are going to see strikes on this level, for minimal service levels to be introduced by departments to make sure that our armed forces are not overwhelmed?
Well, Mr Speaker, representing a garrison city of Colchester, I have nothing but the utmost respect for our armed forces. And it hasn't escaped my notice, Mr Speaker, that many of whom are on lower pay than NHS staff will be giving up their government is right to mitigate the impact of planned industrial action with the ambulance sector. The NHS England have explored a range of measures. This includes engaging with the MOD on military sport. And as a contingency, Mr Speaker, a MACA request for a limited number of personnel has been submitted to the MOD. It was submitted at the end of last week, and the plan is, Mr Speaker, that MOD personnel will be trained to drive ambulances, but only deployed where they're needed across the country.
Mr Speaker, the government needs to stop hiding behind the pay review body. The pay review body sorts out the distribution of the funding, and it's the government which determine the size of the envelope, and it's the envelope which is in dispute. So why won't the Minister get the Treasury Minister alongside him and make sure they negotiate on the size of the envelope, because if they can afford the member for South West Norfolk, they can afford a nurse.
Well, Mr Speaker, the average pay settlements in the private sector range between 4 to 6%, and we want to have a fair deal.
Right, so that was the House of Commons there. Will Quince doing his best to fend off a assault, as you could say, question, I suppose, from the Shadow Health Minister, and essentially centres around, of course, the government's preparedness or lack of preparedness for things like NHS strikes. what Wilkins was trying to say there is we did offer them relatively decent pay rises in his view, of course, but of course it comes to nowhere near the 19.2% that nurses, for example, and their unions are after. Interesting as well that Sir Keir Starmer has also said that those things are unaffordable. And Tobias Elwood piping up on another theme that we're going to be talking about throughout the course of this show, about the Army stepping in to help to cover for ambulance drivers. Just some dates for your diary, really, in case you're thinking of getting ill at any point in the coming days. Nurses will be off, as we understand it, from the 15th to the 20th, some nurses. And ambulance workers, which includes paramedics, call handlers, etc., they'll be off on the 21st and the 28th, as things currently stand. Well, we're going to be returning to that throughout the course of this show, but we are also going to be as well discussing some of the wider economic impacts. There's loads to come, actually, because on many occasions on this show, we've discussed things like the challenge the government is facing on housing illegal immigrants or asylum seekers as well across the channel. It's putting people into hotels. That's costing around £6 million per day. It's been reported that the government is now expected to announce the plans to use holiday camps. I know that's got a lot of you going on in the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's a little teaser of things to come. I am joined, I believe, by Patrick O'Flynn, who is a journalist and Social Democratic Party politician who served as member of the European Parliament. Patrick, great to have you on the show. Let's just talk about this, because I think a lot of people will be seeing the cold weather outside and wondering whether or not using more housing stock for people who just come over the channel is really the right thing to be doing. Now it's holiday camps for illegal immigrants, is it?
Well, it seems to be, doesn't it? And, I remember in the olden days, people used to say about detention centres and prisons too, they're not meant to be a holiday camp. So this is the first sign of our new world where we're holding people who've come to our country illegally. Literally, it is meant to be a holiday camp. Now, the government clearly thinks it'll go down less badly than using some fairly prime city centre hotels. For instance, three cities I know reasonably well are Peterborough, Hull and Stoke-on-Trent. And in each case, the flagship traditional hotel in that city opposite the railway station is either about to be used or being used to house channel migrants. So the government clearly thinks holiday camps tend to be slightly further out of town. This will be all right. And former university halls of residence too. But I just wonder about that. Well, for starters, I think we've got to have a contrast between the previous users, who were British people, working class families going for a holiday camp holiday, saving up all year to do so. Our young students, often paying through the nose to go into student halls. And we've got thousands of young men coming in who've never paid a pound into the national kitty. And
I get that. I get that. Patrick, I mean, for me, the fundamental issue is that I can't help but feel as though we're being lied to, going, well, we're going to use these now to reduce costs in hotels. But it's not, because we're still using hotels. This is double bubble on the old asylum seeker front, isn't it? Because actually what this is now is an admission that in the vast majority of areas, hotels are full, or we're using far too many hotels, or local councils are starting to get up in arms. There could potentially, in the case of the Morecambe and Lancaster area, as a local councillor quite rightly said, there's an inevitable conflict brewing here. And so what they're thinking of doing is, we'll use holiday camps as well, and it's the off-season, so people won't mind. But it won't just be the off-season. I'll be sitting here in summer talking about how normal, ordinary, working-class Brits cannot get a place for love nor money at Butlins because it's overflowing with asylum seekers.
I fear you are correct about that, Patrick. I mean, we look at last year's figure through the whole year of 28,000 channel migrants, and people said that was horrendous. And, it was a massive rise, I think, of 20,000 on the year before. But now, as we sit here, we're already through 44,000 with 3 weeks of the year left. It looks like we're going to top out about 48,000, another massive increase. So the government just hasn't got this under control. And I think you're right. The basic point is they're looking for any accommodation of any description they can find anywhere. And that is going to rebound on British people.
Look, Patrick, I saw... veterans. Yeah, very quickly, very finally on this one. I saw an advert for a particular charity on one of the tubes that I was on this morning about homelessness, and it said that homeless people are something like 4 times more likely to be victims of violence, that They can't even do their sleeping bags up because if they do, then it takes longer for them to get out when someone's trying to kick their head in after a night out or set fire to their sleeping bag and all this stuff. If this is such a big problem, which everyone acknowledges it is, isn't it remarkable that we seem to be able to find not just holiday inns, but holiday camps for people who've just come across the channel, and as we know, an increasing number of those people not indeed actual asylum seekers?
It certainly is, and I'm afraid I think most people got to the position with this Conservative government where they hear all the latest stunts they're going to go in for, and it's safest to conclude in advance. If it's something that would be effective, they won't do it, and if it's something they're going to do, it's not going to be effective. And until my eyes prove me wrong, that's, I'm afraid, the rather cynical view I take of this Conservative government on this issue.
Well, I think you're well within your rights, Patrick. I think you're well within your rights because, as you've said, you can see it before your very eyes. And I am sick and tired of being told that what I can see with my own eyes is some kind of warped reality, when, in fact, it's true. Patrick, thank you very much. Patrick O'Flynn there, journalist and former MEP. I am waiting, by the way, for the inevitable clash between the unions and people who are the Refugees Welcome Brigade, because when you start looking at the amount of money and the amount of resources that were devoted to people crossing the Channel and other means, and thinking about, well, we haven't got enough money to give people a pay rise, well, at some point, something's got to give, hasn't it? But anyway, sticking with money, Britain's economy grew, yes, by 0.5% between September and October. That is according to the Office for National Statistics. The increased activity is being explained largely by an increase in spending with the unplanned bank holiday for the Queen's funeral as well. But economists predict we're still on course for recession by the end of the year. So the economy giveth and the economy taketh away. Well, following the figures being announced, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt said the economy will get worse before it gets better. Always the bearer of good news. Let's get more on this and indeed talk a little bit about the unions as well with our very own Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor with All the Money. Well, initially, to lay people like me, it looked like good news, a 0.5% economic boost.
It is and it isn't, Patrick. Let's just have a look at a graphic here, and GB News radio listeners will have to bear with me. In October, GDP was up 0.5% on the month before, on September. But in September, of course, we had that extra bank holiday. As you said, that meant a little bit of extra spending, but it meant a lot less production overall. So GDP was slow in September, so it made October look good. That's why you've got the increase in October. But the bigger picture, Patrick, I'm afraid, is August, September, October as a whole. We call that the third quarter of the economy, the third three-month block of the economy. GDP was down 0.3%. And if we look at the next slide, we'll see that the Bank of England is now predicting in the final quarter of 2022, that's October, November, December, GDP, they say, will go down again. There you got your two successive quarters of economic contraction. That is the textbook definition of a recession. They don't come along very often, but the Bank of England says we're going to be in recession now with GDP contracting for a while. And that massively complicates politics, in particular, the battle between the government, employers on the one hand, and trade unions on the other.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you've seamlessly, it's almost like we planned it, Liam, isn't it? Seamlessly led us on to this thing, because right now, actually, you are quite in demand when it comes to your views on all this and your expert insight and wisdom when it comes to the union and the problems going ahead, not just for the Tory party.
So, yeah, I've been writing about this quite a lot, and obviously it's a huge theme here on GB News. It strikes me that, obviously, there is going to be the public's patience is going to be tested. It already is. But in the run-up to Christmas and into January and beyond, there will be more industrial action. How does the government play this? It has to say, we're negotiating, but we can't give away all this money, because then you get what we call a wage price spiral. So if they keep giving more wages out of the public purse, that can be inflationary. That bids up wages more, inflation, and you get the upward spiral we had in the late 1970s. But how do Labour play this, Patrick? This is the really interesting thing for me. We're seeing signs of the Labour front bench trying to kind of calibrate between its natural, almost instinctive support for trade unions and an acknowledgement that the public's mood is going to be tested, not least when you've got life-saving public services being put on hold, industrial action with nurses, potentially doctors. They want a 26% pay rise, ambulance drivers, as well as your train drivers and your highway workers and your postal workers and all the rest of it. So you have Wes Streeting now, who is the very canny shadow health secretary. A lot of people look at him potentially a leader in the future. He is presenting himself not as the trade unions champion, but the patients champion against the trade unions in the healthcare sector. You've got Keir Starmer saying that some of these trade union demands are unaffordable. The reality is, though, that Labour gets millions of pounds every year off the trade unions. A third of the votes on its ruling National Executive Committee are trade unions. Half the delegates at Labour conference are trade unions. Yep. You know, this is obviously bad for the government. You've got all these strikes. But it may be, as the strikes go on, unless Labour play it very carefully, it could be bad for Labour, particularly when Rishi Sunak, if he brings in laws in January and February to try and clamp down on trade union strike activity, particularly if it's health workers, some of the public might say, I think that's a good idea. Yeah. But if Keir Starmer and the Labour front bench have to sort of instinctively back the trade unions, it could cause trouble for them. It's not just me saying this. You can see Wes Streeting positioning himself. Even at the weekend, Lord David Blunkett, the former Health Secretary, Labour cabinet legend from the Blair and Brown era, he was warning that unless Labour show themselves to push back a bit against the trade unions, it could cause them some electoral damage.
Yeah, 100% it will. Labour on a sticky wicket when it comes to stuff. Liam, thank you very much. As ever, Liam Halligan there, economics and business editor. There was another article that was written in The Sun, actually, by Trevor Kavanagh. I saw it this morning, which I thought was bang on the money as well, which is that basically, look, there's public sympathy for people who want to go on strike to get more money, especially nurses, etc. But actually, when patients start dying, and the reality of that comes to fruition, especially as the cold snap comes around, people, I think, will change their views. I think people will start to think, well, actually, hang on a minute, in practical reality, is this morally justified? And there we have it. But anyway, your views, GBviews at gbnews.uk. And on that note, loads of you have been getting in touch on the variety of strikes, the smorgasbord of strikes that we're going to be treated to in the coming days. Jay says, do you know if it is possible to volunteer to help out within the NHS during the strikes? That would be a good idea. I would be more than happy to drive, clean up or do whatever is required. Well, Joe, it's interesting because a lot of people could volunteer during the COVID crisis, couldn't they? I wonder whether or not they can do it now. You might be called a scab, though, for breaking the picket lines. It's fascinating. I'm going to be talking a little bit later on to a chap who is a big pro-Socialist Workers' Party and all this stuff, how he feels about the fact the army are getting involved. Rich says, when the military act to replace striking workers, they should be paid their own salary plus the salary of strikers, which should be made tax-free. Hopefully this would help with morale and show the strikers what for. Yeah, fascinating stuff. I know that there is a massive range of views when it comes to the strikes. A lot of people saying, OK, well, look, we have a lot of sympathy for people who maybe have been underpaid for a long time. Inflation has massively exacerbated the take-home pay for various people. Nurses are the especially emotive ones. But like I've said, I can't help but feel when people see the actual reality of this, people not being able to get treated, ambulances not arriving on time, and the knock-on effect of that, which I'm sorry, no one can convince me otherwise, will lead to debt. If it didn't lead to debt, you question what the point of the service was in the first place, wouldn't you? I think the public are going to change their minds, and then at that point, potentially the unions might have to reconsider. I don't know. GBviews at gbnews.uk. There are more patients than there are NHS workers at the end of the day. You're with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, more on the UK's freezing weather and for how long it's expected to last. Also, I will be joined by a former Chief Air Staff for the RAF to discuss the role the military could play during the winter strikes. We're talking about that. And we will, of course, have more on the migrant holiday camp situation. Did you know you can get in a dinghy, you can come across in the channel, and lo and behold, you find yourself at Butlins. No, so we don't roll out the red carpet. I'll be back after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
It's 4 o'clock, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News. Here's what's coming up. We'll cross live to the West Midlands to bring you the very latest on the tragic deaths of 3 boys under the age of 12 who did sadly die after falling through a frozen lake. An industrial action expert and former chief of staff of the RAF will go head-to-head on whether or not the army should be called in to cover strike action. And if we haven't seen enough already from Harry and Meghan, well, there's now more. There's more, thanks to Netflix. A new trailer for their documentary has been released, and basically Prince Harry appears, anyway, to accuse the royal family of gaslighting him. What do you make of all of that? Oh, and of course, we will have the very latest when it comes to noises, rumblings, rumours, suspicions that we're going to start housing illegal immigrants in holiday camps. So Butlins for illegal immigrants. We were already talking, weren't we, as well, about the holiday inns and about the travel lodges or wherever of this world being rather nice for them. 4-star hotels. Well, now apparently they'll have a holiday camp as well. Remarkable, isn't it, as the cold weather draws in and homeless people freeze to death in our streets. Your views, GBViews at gbnews.uk. All of that coming your way and much, much more after all these latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just after 4 o'clock, and the top story today: 3 young boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water at Babs Mill Park in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. One police officer was treated in hospital for hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the children. He has since been released. West Midlands Fire and Rescue Service says a search of the lake has continued to establish if anyone else fell into the water.
We have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing. But until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Meanwhile, yellow warnings of ice, fog and snow are still in place for much of the UK, causing widespread travel disruption. Last night was the coldest night of the year so far, reaching below -15 degrees in Aberdeenshire. However, most of the difficulties caused by plummeting temperatures have been felt in the east and the south of England. There are still significant delays across the rail network, with southeastern trains advising passengers not to travel. Gatwick and Stansted airports have both now reopened after closing their runways yesterday, leading to the cancellation of more than 100 flights. Weather journalist Nathan Rao gave GB News his advice to road users. Well, we'll bring that to you later on. Now, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has warned there's a tough road ahead, despite the fact that Britain's economy grew between September and October. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show a 0.5% increase in GDP during October. However, the economy has shrunk overall, looking at the last 3 months. The Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves said the numbers underline the government's failure to grow the economy. Jeremy Hunt says the government does have a workable plan.
These figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
Now, ambulance staff and a number of NHS workers in Scotland have called off strike action following a pay deal with the Scottish Government. Two unions, Unite and Unison, say an average of 62% of their members backed the pay offer put on the table. For the lowest paid, it would mean an 11.3% pay rise, with an average pay rise for all of 7.5%. The Foreign Secretary has vowed to forge new partnerships beyond the UK's traditional allies. In his first key speech in the role, James cleverly celebrated Britain's traditional alliances, but promised to build relations with influential Asian, Latin American and African countries. He said he'd be making a long-term effort to maintain old friendships and build new ones beyond the UK's traditional allies.
In coming decades, an ever greater share of the world economy, and therefore the world's power, will be in the hands of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That reality has been evident for some time, but I am not convinced that British diplomacy has fully caught up. My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun.
Meanwhile, the International Trade Secretary will arrive in India later as the UK strives to restore a free trade deal. Kemi Badenoch will meet Indian ministers and business leaders in New Delhi for the first formal round of talks since July. The negotiations are expected to focus on cutting tariffs and opportunities for the UK's financial and legal services. The government's still in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with India after the target of securing a deal by October was missed. Now, as you've been hearing, the second trailer for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing some of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to. He was also heard saying that he wondered what would have happened if he hadn't left the royal family. The trailer for the latest 3 episodes, which will be released on Thursday, have been unveiled after the first set was released last week.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
This is GB News, more news as it happens. Now more from Patrick.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, it has emerged that police had to warn teenagers over the weekend about playing on ice in a park in York, and the North Yorkshire Fire and Rescue Service shared a warning message on social media following the tragic events in Solihull. Those events were the 3 boys aged 11, 10 and 8. have died after falling through ice on a frozen lake in the West Midlands. Another child is still said to be very, very poorly in hospital. Here's the latest from the Superintendent of West Midlands Police, Richard Harris.
Our officers were quick to respond at the scene yesterday afternoon, and having worked very closely with our colleagues from other emergency services, went into the lake itself to help rescue the children and to try and assist them as quickly as we possibly could. We've worked very closely with our colleagues in West Midlands Fire Service and also in West Midlands Ambulance Service, and this has been a real joint effort. It is incredibly sad that we do not have any better news for you today regarding yesterday afternoon's incident.
Just such a terrible tragedy, isn't it? I mean, it's absolutely shocking stuff. The details of this are catastrophic, aren't they? And the emergency service are warning people to stay away from open water after that tragic accident at Babs Mill Lake in Solihull. Well, joining me now is GBNews' West Midlands reporter Jack Carson, who is in Solihull for us. Jack, what's the reaction been like in the area to this utter tragedy?
Well, the reaction, Patrick, has been that this community is starting to come together in its droves. A few hours ago, people started to lay flowers, and now, as schools have finished in the area, little children, many of whom may well know the children that have been involved and sadly passed away in this incident, are coming and paying their respects, laying their flowers down. We've had candles lit. A couple of people came and pinned 3 glass angel Christmas decorations to the trees. People have started to pay their respects with little messages and cards. Andy Street, the West Midlands mayor, was here a little bit earlier on. He wrote a card that said, such a tragedy, so unnecessary. My heart goes out to the families that have lost their most precious gift. Another one reads, today we lost 3 angels. May their young hearts rest in peace. So this community is starting to come together. We've already heard news that there are plans here in the area for a candlelit vigil this weekend. One resident telling me their aim is to light the whole edge of the lake with candles. So that is the latest here of people coming together. In terms of the actual operation itself, there's not been much activity in the last kind of hour or so in terms of the police looking still for people in the lake. Of course, some witnesses said that there may have been up to 6 people involved in this incident. The police saying in their press conference earlier that they had no evidence currently of anybody suggested to be missing, and so they were taking those concerns and checking the lake continuously as long as they needed to make sure that there was no children or anybody else involved still in the lake. But those operations at the minute seem to have died down a bit, and the community here is starting to come together to pay their respects to an incident which has shocked this area. Of course, it was just yesterday, those at 2:34 p.m. when the police were called after 4 people were seen to be in trouble in the lake here. The police officer that was the first on the scene rushed in to the lake without any care in the world, almost like a hero, breaking the ice, reportedly punching the ice to try and get some of these children out. Members of the public reported to be there as well. Even when the fire service got here, nobody waited for those specialist divers with that equipment. Everyone just went in the lake to try and rescue these children. When they got out, they were given CPR here on the scene by the paramedic crews, but unfortunately they could not be, 3 of them could not be revived, that 11, 10 and 8-year-old. And what we now hope is that this 6-year-old, who's still in a critical condition, we hear in hospital, makes that recovery, but we're yet to find out.
Jack, thank you very much. Jack Carson there reporting to us after that tragedy. 3 children passed away after they plunged into a lake in Solihull. Right, well, we're just moving away from that, but kind of staying in terms of a weather-related topic, because now if you struggle to get into work this morning, you're being warned to expect further travel disruption with the freezing temperature set to continue. The snow caused widespread travel chaos throughout the UK. Trains have been delayed. Motorists warned to take care after several motorway accidents. Fascinating. There, we were playing clips of a canal. I imagine the great canal pile-up of 2022 will be remembered forever. But anyway, there we go. Hundreds of flights were also delayed or cancelled after snow, ice and freezing fog swept Britain. I was desperately trying to get back from Aberdeen over the weekend. I was told categorically by a travel expert, a travel guru, who will be sitting down to answer some serious questions from me later on, Simon Calder, everybody's favourite travel guru. He told me, Patrick, don't worry, you'll be able to get back from Aberdeen. Well, I wasn't, Simon, and now I'm 400 quid lighter and I spent 12 and a half hours on an overnight train, but I'll let it go. Flights have since resumed, but further cancellations and delays are possible. A yellow weather warning is in place for much of the UK, with disruption set to continue as we head into the evening rush hour. Lots of you now will be sitting at your desks thinking, oh gosh, will I make it home from work? No. So, has the troll from Trondheim done its worst, or is there more to come? Let's find out from Met Office meteorologist and weather forecaster is Alex Deakin. Alex, thank you very much. OK, so people will be thinking, how much longer do we have to endure the hell of, roughly speaking, an inch of snow, which will grind Britain to a halt? How long?
Well, it's going to stay cold all this week, Patrick. There are strong signals. If you don't like the cold, good news on the way through the weekend into next week, because it is going to be turning milder during the weekend. But for the rest of this week, we are going to have to put up with temperatures around or a touch above freezing by day, well below freezing at night. Not huge amounts more in the way of snow expected. Northern Scotland really bearing the brunt in the next 24 hours, but some snow flurries likely across parts of northeast England too. And there's a bit of a question mark where I am down in the southwest. We could see a little bit of snow tomorrow night. So not huge amounts of snow, but it's staying cold, it's staying very frosty, and there is always the risk of icy conditions when the temperatures are this low. But changes into next week.
Yes. Now, Alex, I was listening to a lot of radio and watching a lot of TV on my 12.5-hour overnight train journey back from Aberdeen, followed by 3 tubes and a rather long car journey. And one word that stood out to me was unexpected. OK, unexpected. This snow came out of nowhere. But it didn't, did it, Alex? Because you'd been warning about it for a while and it just came from the sky.
Yeah, well, we put a warning out for the southeast of England for this snow on Sunday night on Friday. So, yeah, there was plenty of notice about it. We've been talking about it for a couple of weeks now. The 10-day trend forecast that I did last Wednesday that's had 300,000 views on YouTube, that talked about this cold spell lasting throughout this week as well. So, yeah, we've had plenty of notice about this. There was quite a bit of snow across the southeast. Perhaps a little bit more than anticipated in the warning on Friday, but there was certainly plenty of notice that there was snow and cold weather on the way. We've been talking about it for quite some time.
OK, and just very quickly, I don't suppose you know yet what the chances of a white Christmas are?
It's way too early to tell, Patrick. I'll be sure to tell you first, of course. But yeah, too early to tell. Looks like it's turning milder as we go through the first part of next week, but then the back end of next week, we're towards Christmas and temperatures may drop off again, but probably not as low as they are now. Just too early to say. Stay tuned.
Can I just say, yeah, firstly, thank you very much for all the work that you do, desperately trying to keep people informed. But you could even tell us now, categorically, it's going to be a white Christmas, but you still get people there. The totally unexpected white Christmas. Where on earth did all of this snow come from? Oh, it's almost like someone's been trying to tell us about all of this. Alex, thank you very much for banging the drum for weather. Alex Deakin there, the Met Office's meteorologist and weather forecaster. And I think Housewife's favourite as well, it's fair to say. You are with me, Patrick Christys, right here on GB News. We've got loads coming your way, absolutely loads, because ministers are currently in talks to discuss deploying the army to cover striking workers. Is that right? Do you think it's right that we should rope the military in? I will be joined by a former RAF Chief of Staff and a Socialist Party organiser. I think it's fascinating, this, because I wonder whether or not that particular Socialist Party organiser feels quite strongly that the army shouldn't get involved. Is the army letting down workers' rights by virtue of helping out, I suppose you could argue, the government and indeed patients as well to try to mitigate these strikes? What do you make of all of that? Strong views on that. I'm also going to be getting stuck right into this utter fiasco. And supposedly holiday camps are going to be used to house asylum seekers, illegal immigrants, people coming over the channel. What do you make of that as the temperatures drop and there are people on the streets? There are indeed homeless veterans as well, aren't there? I know I keep banging on about them, but why not? I suspect there's going to be some strong views. I want to go to your emails when I come back as well, because I think there's going to be really strong views on both of those topics. The strikes and, of course, whether or not holiday camps should be used to now house asylum seekers. What next? The writ. I'll be back in a moment.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. OK, welcome back, everybody. I've got some more breaking news for you. This is very breaking. In fact, it's literally happened in the last few seconds because members of the RMT on Network Rail have rejected the latest pay offer and will go ahead with 2 48-hour strikes this week. The first walkout is set to start tomorrow. Network Rail had offered a 5% pay rise for this year, and that was backdated to January, so it's basically a year, isn't it? With another 4% at the start of 2023, and a guarantee of no compulsory job losses until January 2025. The RMT's executive recommended that its members rejected this offer, saying that it was linked to significant changes to working practices. I'm going to give you some figures now on the amount of people who voted in this vote and also the amount of people who rejected it. So the RMT said 63.6% of their members voted to reject Network's rail offer, and that was an 83% turnout. So 83% of their members voted, and 63.6% of them rejected it. There we go, some numbers for you there. Anyway, there's lots to get stuck into there. How do you feel about the fact that essentially what they voted to reject is no compulsory job losses until 2025. I think on the face of it, people would think that's all right. No compulsory job losses. You're guaranteed a job, essentially, until 2025. And then there's a initial 5% pay rise backdated for the course of this entire year, plus another 4% to start in 2023. That, of course, would equate to 9%. I know my maths isn't great, but there you are. Doesn't quite cover the rate of inflation, but it's not a bad start. Interesting stuff, because another way of reading it would be that just under 40% of the 83% who bothered to turn out to vote, presumably, were happy with that deal. But there we go. So we're picking the bones out of that one rather a lot. That is the breaking news. And what do you make of it? GBviews at gbnews.uk. But we are set to see soldiers driving ambulances to cover striking NHS staff, potentially. It's something that ministers are currently discussing. So right now, ministers are locked in talks. There's a COBRA meeting taking place to decide whether or not, or indeed how, the military is going to be roped in to solve the NHS crisis of strikes. We've had some breaking news for you there about the RMT. So that's your rail news. Those strikes due to take place from tomorrow after they rejected what is in the round, roughly a 9% offer. 5% of that backdated for the end of this year. But importantly, I think for me there, I'm reading these figures live with you, so there we go. But 40% of them, roughly, just under 40% actually, said that they would have taken this deal. So that's interesting. But also, as we know, now the Army is going to be roped in for what's been going on in our NHS, and that is the discussions that we're also expecting the upshot of throughout the course of the show. So stay tuned, basically, a one-stop shop for all your latest striking news. A series of strikes is set to get underway tomorrow. Rail workers are going to walk out. Postal workers will hold a 2-day strike from Wednesday. NHS staff are due to hold a day of action on Thursday. There's a lot there, actually. The government has said around 2,000 Army staff, civil servants and volunteers are training for various roles, including ambulance drivers and firefighters. I've had a few emails in from diligent viewers and listeners saying, hey, Patrick, it's not just the Army, potentially the RAF and the Navy will be involved as well. If that's true, yeah, fine, I'll look into that. But it's not the first time the armed forces have been called in. It's happened before when Labour was facing a winter of union discontent, as Sir Michael Graydon, who is the former Chief of Air Staff for the RAF, can explain. Thank you very much. Look, great to have you on the show. Sorry to kind of juggle things about there, but we had, as ever on this show, a little bit of breaking news immediately before we were going to go into a topic. So I'll get you on what you're booked on to talk about initially anyway, which is the Army, or the military, I think I should be saying, roped into trying to handle the nurses' strike, the NHS strike and the ambulance strikes. Are you a little bit miffed that the military are having to do this? Is the government leaning on the military too much here?
There's nothing new in this. You've touched on the winter of discontent. I'll come back to that in a moment because it seems to be the closest parallel to what we're confronting today. But I'd remind your viewers and listeners that using the military in what's called the military aid to the civilian authority is something that happens quite regularly. Cast your mind back to the Olympics, when it was absolutely the military stepped in, sorted it. Cast it back to the mad cow problem. The Army in particular, but all the services sorted that out pretty quickly. Disaster relief, the military are on standby for that and react quickly. And of course, Lockerbie, you'll remember, and the migrant issue as well. So there's nothing new in this. But let's go back to the winter of discontent, which I remember particularly because I was commanding a fighter squadron at the time, and a particularly rough winter. And I had about 15 to 20% of my people away. I was holding what was called quick reaction alert. That is a 10-minute standby to intercept aircraft. But we did it. And I remember very well going to see my people who were driving ambulances, fire engines, and collecting rubbish at the time. And one of the points that they made was that actually the people that they were substituting for were getting paid rather more than they were, which they found a little ironic, to say the least.
Well, this is a massive topic and indeed a point that's well worth raising because as we have just learned then, that apparently, according to reports that have just dropped, that the RMT and their members have voted to reject what at least appears to be, from Network Rail anyway, a 5% pay increase backdated from January, followed by a 4% pay increase, presumably from this January, as we understand it, coupled with no compulsory job losses until 2025. Maybe it's actually the Army who've got the worst working conditions here. I dare say that the military maybe would have voted in favour of those kind of conditions. Your views?
Well, in the 70s, the winter of discontent at that time, let's just look at that situation. Basically, the unions at the time were pushing very, very hard in every direction, and a lot of people were getting jolly good pay rises, except the military. I can't remember whether the police were getting it, but I can tell you that the military were not. And the big change for the military, because they were very underpaid at the time, I had a number of my people, the sort of people who were out there working on ambulances, fire engines and things, on supplementary benefits because they weren't actually being paid enough. When the government changed, when Margaret Thatcher came in, she gave the pay rise that probably we would, there's no doubt we were generously treated by Margaret Thatcher, but she recognised that we had been treated very badly at that time. I don't think that, and I've read that people say that the military are not wanting to do this. It's not my experience. I think the military will more than be ready to do this in what is basically a national emergency. And I think they will continue to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have also been getting a lot of emails in from people saying, what are you doing even questioning the idea that the military will be able to do it? I'm certainly not questioning the idea they'll be able to do it. I suppose it's a question of whether or not they should be doing it in the first place and whether or not they actually would want to. But there we go. Look, thank you very, very much. It is Sir Michael Graydon, their former Chief of Air Staff for the RAF. But I wanted to speak to this particular chap. He's fast becoming a regular here on the channel and indeed on this show, because I wanted to get the union's perspective on all of this. Rob Williams is the Socialist Party Industrial Organiser and indeed a trade unionist. Good to see you again, Rob. Thank you very much. Difficult to know where to start with you today because we had that breaking news literally about 30 seconds ago. But I want to get your angle on the army. Are you a bit annoyed that the army are stepping in or the military are stepping in? Do you think they should be holding the picket line with the other workers? Are they undermining workers?
I can imagine the people who are most annoyed is the army, is the troops themselves. And actually, I think they had a pay rise of less than 4%. There's a strong argument, isn't there? Shouldn't rank and file members of the army be allowed the chance to join a trade union? Look, isn't the issue here is that the government are meeting today. We are told, ministers are meeting. They've got two choices here, haven't they? They can continue talking about the army taking on these services. They can talk about more anti-union legislation, or they could do what they should be doing and what they're increasingly being advised to do in some of the media, and that is come to a resolution of these disputes.
Well, they would argue, yeah, well, in a nutshell, yes, but also it doesn't solve the issue because they would argue, and indeed they can argue now, can't they, that they've offered, Network Rail have offered the RMT and their members there a chance of a backdated 5% pay rise from last January. They've also offered them, apparently, a 4% pay rise going forward from this January onwards, plus the confirmation there will be no compulsory job losses until 2025. And from what I can see anyway, the figures coming through, roughly speaking, about 37% of the people who bothered to vote, only 83% turnout, 37% of them said that they would have quite fancied that.
I tell you what, Patrick, you're a great mind. I mean, to say only an 83% turnout. I would have thought
we are 100% turnout. It's for your money. I mean, if I had a vote on pay, I'd be straight up there.
Do you know, right, you wouldn't get a councillor elected in this country on anything over 30% probably. Look, yes. The point is that deal, as you've mentioned, is to their absolute credit that they rejected. That's what the union recommended. The pay rises you're talking about, don't forget, we're talking about pay rises there really over 2 years. That's what we're talking about. Inflation, Patrick, is over 14%. It's eye-watering. It's catastrophic for people. So, look, the issue is here. Look, can I just make this point, is that the government has been telling us all along, aren't they, that they're not involved in these disputes, right? There's a good evidence to suggest that the government were part of pulling the deal on the rails on Royal Mail. Yesterday, the leaders of the nursing unions said to the government, look, if you come and talk to us and negotiate with us, we will discuss with you about pulling or suspending that action to allow negotiations. You couldn't wait to get government ministers on the telly saying, we don't want to talk to you. People will be watching this programme and will now know that this Tory government is only responsible for the action that's taking place.
OK, Rob, it's rather annoying that I'm not allowed to have more time with you because I would always thoroughly enjoy our chats. But there we go. Unfortunately, we have to go, Rob. So there we go. Rob Williams, thank you very much. He's Socialist Party Industrial Organiser and indeed a trade unionist. Might be nice to have a little bit longer than that, but there we go. You're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Up next, rather unfortunately, we'll be discussing the new trailer for the next instalment of what some are calling Harry and Meghan's War on the Windsors. But first, it's time for your latest headlines.
Patrick, thanks very much indeed. Well, let's bring you some more detail on that breaking news that has come to us in the last half hour or so. Rail strikes, we understand, will continue now into the Christmas period after members of the RMT union rejected the latest pay offer. 63% of the union's members turned down a deal offered by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year and a 4% rise in 2023. Now, 2 48-hour strikes will go ahead, and passengers are being warned to expect delays and cancellations both tomorrow and Wednesday, as well as on Friday and Saturday. The government's convened an emergency COBRA meeting in a bid to minimise disruption during the planned industrial action across a number of public sectors. Well, in other news today, 3 boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. One police officer was released from hospital following treatment for hypothermia.
We have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing, but until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
The second trailer for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing some of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to, and he's also seen musing what would have happened if he hadn't left the royal family. The trailer for the latest 3 episodes, which will be released on Thursday, have been unveiled after the first set was released last week. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Stay with us. Patrick's back in just a moment.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked.
Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Well, welcome back, everybody. Right, we've got loads to cram in now for the next 20 minutes or so of this hour, not least because we had some breaking news earlier on about the RMT. Their members have rejected a pay deal. Anyway, the Trade Secretary has travelled to New Delhi today to revive talks on a free trade agreement between the UK and India. It was very controversial, this trade deal, and we're going to unpick why. Kemi Badenoch is aiming to strengthen ties between the two countries and will meet with Indian politicians and business leaders, while the negotiations are expected to focus on a deal to cut tariffs and open opportunities for the UK financial and legal services. They are due to last through the week and are the first formal round of talks since July. But we will all remember there was rather a lot attached to this deal, wasn't there? Because for a while there was even talk of something like, basically, like a freedom of movement deal being lobbed in with it when it came to Indian nationals. Joining me now is Sunil Sharma, who's the Chief Operating Officer for the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. Sunil, thank you very much. Some people will be looking at this now and going, hang on a minute, is it true that Kemi Badenoch has decided that she's not going to talk about things like student visas in this deal? Because that appeared to be a red line for the Indians before, but I know a lot of Brits were thinking, well, we don't need a trade deal at all costs.
Yeah, I don't think they'll be discussing about sort of freedom of movement between the two countries. I think geographically it makes no sense for both countries. I think strengthening ties on trade and trade alone, that in itself is, largely complex. I think that requires a lot of time, and it's a great opportunity for India and us, and I hope they focus on that specific area. You look at China in the last 2 and a bit years, there's such an opportunity for India to almost be that replacement for China. They're similar to us in that they are a democracy, also have a massive population, have the capacity to have these sort of, having incredible operations. We've seen Apple move a lot of their factories from China to India. So I hope that the focus is on trade as opposed to visas and movement of people.
And the reason why it's relevant is because this trade deal famously stalled not so long ago, and it is widely believed that one of the main sticking points on it was the fact that we, supposedly anyway, weren't prepared to offer them something like a free movement deal, or certainly when it came to student visas, etc. But this is important, isn't it, I think, for the government to actually get something sorted here, to get this done, because they need a win, don't they? And actually a massive bumper trade deal with India would be that.
Definitely. And to be honest, this should be a fairly easy win in some ways. Like I said, we're both democracies. We're both, there's so much shared history and values between the two countries. In Narendra Modi, you can see there's a massive move towards being closer with the UK and the US, and generally the West. For a long time, India's alliances have been more Soviet Union, Russia, and ours has been more towards Pakistan. So there's always been that almost subtle bit of rivalry between the two countries. There hasn't always been a very cohesive strategy. I would say right now this is the best relationship the two countries have had maybe since India's independence. In particular, when Boris Johnson, who was fantastic in breaking down that barrier between the two countries. So it's a really good opportunity now for almost Rishi to take some of that credit and really do a nice, easy trade deal. Because like I said, these are two countries that want to work closely together. So I don't perceive this as being too difficult. The visa stuff is very interesting. And I hope that it doesn't become the main talking point between the two countries. If it's about taking some of their brightest and best students from India, which we already do in a very brilliant capacity, then I'm 100% all for that. Well, I think we should continue to do that.
But this is one of the things that I couldn't quite get my head around earlier on, whether or not that's just because I'm a bit thick. I mean, there is always that. But I would have thought if I was the Indian government, I wouldn't be trying to accuse the UK of being in some way racist or a bit ill-judged for allowing student visas over here, let's be honest, with a view to remain. I would, if I was the Indian government, be quite liking a lot of my Indian students, the best and the brightest, to be going and getting a first-rate education over here in the United Kingdom and then coming back home so they can, employ their trade over back here so there isn't a brain drain out of India. So I thought that was a really interesting dynamic for the Indians before, who seemed to be saying, well, actually, you're a bit racist if you don't want them to stay. I would have thought the Indians would have wanted them to go back.
I think that is, I'd agree. I think it is a bit bizarre. I think what's interesting about the Indian students staying is there is a because generally we look at British Indians and Indians in this country, they perform very well. If you do all the parameters, they outperform even British white people, whether it's economics and all this this is why the racism argument makes no sense whatsoever, because every single parameter doesn't. But then what's interesting about the student visas in particular is we are seeing a lot of them who get student visas and who actually then skip out on education, so they don't follow through with the whole visa ship, and they go for skilled worker visas where they end up staying. Which, I'll be honest, it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, because they often will be they'll see a shortage where maybe, some of British people don't necessarily want that job. They end up taking it. Again, they're contributing to the economy. So I'm all for that sort of stuff. Giving this free pass to Indians coming in, I think it's part of their negotiation tactics. I don't think it's anything more than that. I think we need to be here as stern as possible.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be keeping a close eye on that. Sunil, thank you very much. Sunil Sharma, Chief Operating Officer for the Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth. There is that India trade deal. The talks are currently ongoing between Kemi Badenoch and her counterpart over there, and a lot of things for people will be about whether or not it, frankly, includes some kind of visa-free travel. Some would argue an exploitation of our immigration system, but we'll have to wait and see. The UK economy will get worse before it gets better, said Chancellor Jeremy Hunt this morning, following signs of Britain heading towards a recession, despite, which I can't say, apparently, recession, there we go, despite data from the Office for National Statistics showing that the economy actually grew by 0.5% between September and October. But is this the true picture? Everybody cares about the money in their pocket. We've got loads coming your way about more of the fruity, flousy stuff, about migrants staying in holiday camps, about Harry and Meghan's latest trailer, but really... Quite literally, let's get down to brass tacks on this. Joining me in the studio is Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor, with On the Money. Right, Liam, rattle us through the numbers, please, while I try and clear my throat.
Steady. Put your dentures back in.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
So the numbers that came out this morning, GDP, gross domestic product, all the transactions in the economy. In October, the economy actually grew compared to September, despite all the doom and gloom. But that was mainly because in September, we had that extra bank holiday, which meant that the September number was lower than it otherwise would have been. The bigger picture, Patrick, is that August, September, October, what we call the third quarter, the economy actually shrank by 0.3%. It's likely to shrink for the next 3 months too, so November, December, January, according to the Bank of England anyway. And that means we are now technically in recession. If that happens, that's not a great thing. On the other hand, unemployment is pretty low. This is happening across the world. The US is already in recession, the world's biggest economy. A lot of the big European economies are in recession too. So I think Jeremy Hunt on this occasion is correct when he says the economic outlook's probably going to get a bit worse before it gets better.
But it's important to have context, and I think that's been lacking for a lot of the media throughout the course of all this, especially when it came to Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng as well. Globally, the global picture, we like to do ourselves down and go, oh, Britain's in recession, Britain's terrible, look at the absolute abject mess that we've made of everything. What is the wider picture? Because it sounds like everyone else is not doing great either.
We're actually in the middle of the pack of the big Western economies in particular. Our inflation's actually slightly lower at the moment than the Eurozone. Unemployment is certainly lower than all the other big European economies. So it feels bad, and I'm not going to suggest that a lot of people aren't suffering. They are, but this is definitely a global phenomenon. What I would say, Patrick, is throughout this week in the run-up to Christmas, we've got quite a lot of economic data coming out. We've got the inflation number on Wednesday. Inflation's currently 11.1%. I actually think it might tick down a little bit, the November inflation number. We'll have to see. Importantly, the next day, Thursday, you've got the Bank of England making its final move or decision of 2022 on interest rates. Think back, at the beginning of this year, in January, the Bank of England's interest rate was 0.25%, a quarter of 1%. It's now 3%.
Yes.
Because they were on lockdown emergency levels. Interest rates now 3%. It could go up to about 3.5% later this week, and that will push up on mortgage costs and if you've got personal loans. But actually, if you'd have talked to me like 2 weeks ago, we would have said interest rates would have gone up even more this coming Thursday. So it seems as if inflation may be abating a little bit, and it seems as if the Bank of England won't be pushing up interest rates as fast as it otherwise would have been. Okay. But borrowing costs are still going up.
Liam, thank you very much, as ever. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor with On The Money. Right, OK, we're moving away from that now and talking about... yes, here we go. It was just a matter of moments ago, wasn't it, that I had to read out the names Harry and Meghan, and it's happening all over again. Harry and Meghan, their Netflix docuseries, it's been released, bits of it, and it seems the final 3 episodes are far more controversial, based on the latest trailer. Oh, I've not got to watch a trailer again, have I? Let's have a look and a listen.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Oh, when will it end? Right, OK. So, joining me now is royal historian and broadcaster Rafe Haydel-Munku. Rafe, thank you very much. So, from what I can gather anyway, he's basically saying that his brother has a favoured status, which presumably is because he's going to be king one day. I don't know how many times that has to be explained to Harry, whose own book is called Spare, so he must have got it through his skull at some point. And, they accuse the royal family of gaslighting. Did he explain it all to me, Rafe?
Yes, well, Spare may be the title. I think Spare Me is really the reaction I have to all of these trailers that we've seen. I mean, I'm just glad that Her Majesty the Queen isn't around to see this, to see her own grandson betray her memory, her family, and, of course, the institution that's given him and his wife everything, and upon which their current continued fame continues to rest, and from which they clearly continue to profit to a great degree. But, watching this trailer, I could really understand why Harry and Meghan got so panicked after the Queen died unexpectedly. I don't know whether you remember in the autumn, we were told that they were trying to desperately get Netflix to delay the release of this documentary or to cut bits out of it because I think they felt it went too far. But they didn't have that final say, and I can see why Netflix would want to go ahead, because if the trailer's anything to go by, there's some quite explosive stuff here. As you've said, Meghan saying that she wasn't being thrown to the wolves, she was being fed to the wolves. Spare me once again. Institutional gaslighting. Can you imagine that, accusing Buckingham Palace of doing that? And, this nauseating torrent of self-pity that just is endless, saying, Harry asks, I wonder what would have happened to us had we not got out when we did. Well, I can tell you the answer to that, Harry. Nothing would have happened. Everything would have carried on the same, except in this fantasy world that you and Meghan have created.
Yeah, and we saw some headlines there in that trailer about with the Queen named in it. Queen orders this, Queen orders that. And frankly, I mean, the reviews that I could see online from the previous 3 episodes were absolutely catastrophic. I mean, I think even The Guardian only gave it 3 stars. You would imagine Meghan pretty much has shares in there. She doesn't actually. Don't sue me, Meghan, for flip's sake. Anyway, right. But if that's the case, and now they've got it coming out and potentially really dishing it out for the Queen, you would have just thought, I mean, how to make yourself international pariahs, and then it's just going to be what? The world's fault. I mean, we're starting to look at it from this perspective, aren't we? Which is that, actually, at what point is Meghan going to go, maybe it isn't everybody else's fault?
Well, we've known for a long time, right, that Meghan is a delusional drama queen. But what's really unfortunate is to see through this documentary series, I think, how far Harry's been willing to go along with seeing his family traduced in this manner. And you sort of saw his reaction, cringing slightly on camera when Meghan mockingly did a curtsy. And you could see that that he was in a bit of a dilemma over that. But yes, this complete lack of self-awareness. Look, this country, the Commonwealth, are going through one of the most difficult times in modern history. Millions of people suffering from the after effects of COVID, a cost of living crisis, health and healthcare is desperate. Mental trauma is very difficult at this time because of all of these factors. And here we have this, privileged, pampered prima donnas complaining and asking for sympathy over the most trivial of matters, when actually most of us would gladly trade our lot in to have the life of luxury that they lead.
Look, absolutely. And I for a long time have said that I think Prince Harry would be a psychologist's field day, a therapist's field day. I'm starting to wonder whether or not Meghan Markle... Well, I'm not starting to wonder. I get Meghan Markle obviously is as well. Can you imagine living in Meghan's world, really? But there we go. Rafe, thank you very much. Rafe Haydel-Munku there is royal historian and broadcaster, just reacting, as indeed I was, to the latest trailer. We'll be talking about that again a little bit later. But it's painful. It's painful to be discussing this next story, as I was rather hoping that today we'd be discussing England's chances of reaching the World Cup final. Instead, the discussion has shifted to whether Gareth Southgate can or indeed will continue as the England team manager. Following the quarter-final defeat to France on Saturday, Southgate said he would take time to review and reflect before deciding whether to carry on in his role. He's now saying that he's conflicted about his future, having found large parts of the last 18 months difficult. Some would argue that he did bring that on himself slightly by getting involved in some work issues. But let's see what sports broadcaster Aidan McGee makes of it. Aidan, thank you very much. We're in a really bizarre situation at the moment where England, well, at least on paper, underperforming at a World Cup. That's possibly a bit unfair, but yeah. And actually an England manager being begged to stay.
I wouldn't necessarily say beg to stay. I mean, there are plenty of people out there who act as detractors to Gareth Southgate's reign. I would also say that the problem that is besetting them right now, not being able to get past calibre opponents in either a World Cup or a European Championship finals, is something that's beset predecessors for decades and decades. England are flat-track bullies on the international stage. They can beat the teams who are ranked around them in the FIFA rankings or slightly below or even further below that. They can swat them away quite easily. Don't forget, 5-6 years ago, we weren't even able to do that. We lost to Iceland in the second round of Euro 2016. We didn't even make it out the group stage back in the World Cup 2014 in Brazil. So that is progress of sorts. However, there still is that perennial problem. France defeated. Italy last time defeated. Croatia were ranked actually lower than us in the rankings in 2018, defeated. So that problem still exists. I don't know if it's mental. I don't know if it's about psychology. Sam Allardyce said it was a mental block somewhere along the lines. Yes, it wasn't a penalty shootout that did for us this time, but it was still penalties of sort. My only issue is that I don't really know who replaces Gareth Southgate. There is not a flurry of names coming into my mind. There are plenty of people who would fraternise with the job because it pays about as much as a Premier League job pays these days, especially like a top six one. National associations don't tend to operate like that around the world. They tend to pay a lot less. So there's lots to consider. This thing about the last 18 months, I'm not really sure about that because, yes, he's engaged with some woke issues. However, he's a company man. That's what he is. So he should be being paid that kind of money. That's what the FA wants him to do. You know, if he's going to take the money, he has to parrot the political angles that they take, right? If you look at, say, Eddie Howe, for example, if he came in, I don't think he'd do it because I think he's on a good thing at Newcastle. You'd have this juxtaposition of how he's having to defend a murderous regime who own Newcastle United and then going into this fluffy jumper situation with the FA. So that's difficult. In terms of the players, these are elite players, Patrick. These are players who are some of the highest paid players in world football. Yeah. I just wonder whether... I'm not convinced they're the problem. I think that you look at Germany in the lead up to the 2014 World Cup victory. They were knocking on the door for quite some time. They had that great reset after the Euro 2000. They worked towards it. Maybe part of sport, part of achieving things at elite level is that you have to take some knocks. First of all, maybe this is the latest in a long line before England actually achieve something. OK, just very quickly, if you had to put money on it, is Gareth Southgate still going to be England manager in a couple of days' time? Yeah, I think he will, yeah. Oh, thank you. I think he will. Quick, yeah. And the Croatia-France final repeat of 2018, that's my prediction. And that's not even needing a crystal ball. The difficulty here is that whether or not we now want the French to go on and win it, because then we've lost to the winners. But the problem mainly being that would mean that French people... They've got some great players. Yeah, they have got some great players. I did think ours were better, but it doesn't matter now because we're out. Aidan McGee, thank you very, very much. Aidan McGee there, sports correspondent extraordinaire. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Don't go anywhere, as there is still lots to come in the final hour of the programme. Weather disruption, army strike cover, and should we put migrants in disused holiday parks? That's right, I'll be back in a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
As a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Bang on the top of the hour. It's 5 o'clock. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News. In the next hour, as 3 boys under the age of 12 sadly die after falling into a lake in the West Midlands, police are urging people to stay clear of frozen water. A former military intelligence officer will give us his views on whether or not the military should be called in to cover strike action. Within the last hour, within the last few minutes, really, members of the RMT have rejected the latest pay offer. I'll pick through the bones of that with you. Strong views, I imagine, there. If we haven't seen enough of Harry and Meghan's face, well, there's now more. Thanks to Netflix, a new trailer for their documentary has been released, and I will continue to discuss reports that the government is going to use holiday camps to accommodate asylum seekers instead of putting them up in hotels. They say it's going to save money on the hotel costs. Well, it won't, because they'll be in the hotels and they'll be in holiday camps, and presumably they'll just be in there forever as well. But now, it's your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top story this hour, rail strikes will continue into the Christmas period after members of the RMT union rejected the latest pay offer. 63% of the union's members turned down a deal offered by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year and a 4% pay rise in 2023. Now, 2 48-hour strikes will go ahead, and passengers are being warned to expect delays and cancellations tomorrow and Wednesday, as well as on Friday and Saturday. Government ministers have held an emergency COBRA meeting in a bid to minimise disruption during the planned industrial action across a number of public sectors. Meanwhile, ambulance staff and a number of NHS workers in Scotland have called off a strike following a pay deal with the Scottish Government. 2 unions, Unite and Unison, say an average of 62% of their members backed the pay offer on the table. For the lowest paid, it would mean an 11.3% pay rise, with an average rise of 7.5%. Now, as you've been hearing, 3 boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were 8, 10 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital. 1 police officer has been released from hospital following treatment for hypothermia after trying to punch through the ice to reach the boys. Chief Superintendent Richard Harris says a search of the lake has continued to establish if anyone else fell into the water.
We have to be 100% certain that there is no one else possibly in the water at this time. It's important to stress, though, that we've had no contact from anybody suggesting that there's anybody else missing. But until we're 100% certain, we will be carrying on searches throughout the course of today.
Now, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has warned there's a tough road ahead, despite the fact that Britain's economy grew between September and October. Figures from the Office for National Statistics show a 0.5% increase in GDP during October. However, the economy has shrunk overall, looking at the last 3 months. Well, the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, says the numbers underline the government's failure to grow the economy, while Jeremy Hunt says the government does have a workable plan.
These figures confirm that this is a very challenging economic situation here and across the world, and it will get worse before it gets better. But we have a plan that will more than halve inflation over the next year, and if we stay the course, we can get back to the strong economic growth that we need.
The Foreign Secretary has vowed to forge new partnerships beyond the UK's traditional allies. In his first key speech in the role, James cleverly celebrated Britain's traditional alliances, but promised to build relations with influential Asian, Latin American and African countries. He said he'll be making a long-term effort now to maintain old friendships and build new ones beyond the UK's traditional allies.
In the coming decades, an ever greater share of the world economy, and therefore the world's power, will be in the hands of countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. That reality has been evident for some time, but I am not convinced that British diplomacy has fully caught up. My goal is to build on the work of my predecessors and ensure that we do catch up. And under me, that task has begun.
Meanwhile, the International Trade Secretary will arrive in India later as the UK strives to restore a free trade deal. Kemi Badenoch will meet Indian ministers and business leaders in New Delhi for the first formal round of talks since July. The negotiations are expected to focus on cutting tariffs and opportunities for the UK's financial and legal services. The government is still in the process of negotiating a free trade agreement with India after the target of securing a deal by October was missed. Now, as you've been hearing, the second trailer of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's Netflix docu-series has been released, with Prince Harry accusing some of lying to protect his brother. It's not clear who he's referring to. He was also heard musing that he wondered what would have happened if he hadn't left the royal family. The trailer for the latest 3 episodes, which will be released on Thursday, have been unveiled after the first set were released last week.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
You're up to date on GB News. More news as it happens. Now more from Patrick.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, it's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Now, we've got loads coming for you in the final hour of this show. A little bit later on, we are going to be talking, of course, about whether or not we should be putting asylum seekers in these holiday camps and whether or not you agree with that. They say it's going to cut costs when it comes to the hotels, but we all know that it won't, will it? Because they'll be in hotels and in the holiday camps. We're also going to be discussing the Harry and Meghan latest, but before that, it's something, frankly, well, a lot more serious, really. It's a tragedy because the cold snap has produced some tragic consequences as 3 boys aged 8, 10 and 11 have died after falling through the frozen Babs Mill Lake in Solihull. Another child is said to be seriously unwell in hospital. The police have confirmed that nobody else has been reported missing, and emergency services are urging people to steer clear from open water following the lethal accident. Joining me now is GB News' West Midlands reporter, it's Jack Carson, who is in Solihull for us. Jack, yeah, it's a sad weekend, of course, for the families affected and for the local community. Just any updates for us?
Well, Patrick, the update really here is that in terms of the actual police operation, that is now kind of ceased for the day. They're no longer right now looking for people in the lake. Like you said, the Superintendent Richard Harris in that press conference said that they had no reason to believe that there were any more people involved in the incident than the 4 that were already accounted for. But of course, they said they had to do as much as possible and keep going for as long as possible to make sure the witness statements that they were getting were absolutely true, or people had just heard different things. So they're also appealing for people to come forward, witnesses that may have witnessed any part of the event, not even the incident itself, but had just maybe seen the boys by the lake, to go to the West Midlands Police website and submit any kind of information that they may have to help them in their inquiries. They're not treating it as a criminal investigation at the moment, and this evening people in this community are starting to come together, laying tributes, laying flowers, laying candles here. There's going to be a candlelight vigil this Saturday, and I've heard from locals that there are attempts that they're trying to light the whole edge of the lake with candles, so that will be quite a picture if that is able to go ahead. Of course, the police have to finish their operation here as well. 2 people earlier left 3 kind of glass angel baubles, pinned them to the tree, and that's one of the most devastating things about this, is that this has happened so close to Christmas, and this community really coming together to support those families involved, because so many of them would have had their presents already bought for them this Christmas, getting ready to break up from school, see friends over the festive period, and yet this cold snap has caused such a devastating incident.
Jack, thank you very much. Jack Carson there, our West Midlands reporter, just bringing us the latest on that tragedy. 3 children sadly passing away after falling into a lake through the ice, of course. Well, look, we're just going to move away from that now. And within the last hour, hopes of a major breakthrough in the rail dispute have been shattered after members of the RMT rejected a pay offer. The union will now press ahead with 2 48-hour strikes at Network Rail, the 14 train companies, tomorrow and Friday. Right, now, this is where we need to get our heads around some numbers and delve into the granular detail of this, because the RMT said 63.6% of members voted to reject Network Rail's offer, but the turnout was 83%. Network Rail had offered a 5% pay rise for this year, backdated to January, with another 4% at the start of 2023, and a guarantee of no compulsory job losses until January 2025. Now, maths is not my strong point, so I'm going to hold my hands up to this straight away. Maths is not my strong point, but a couple of quick sums. There's, roughly speaking, around 52% of the people that the RMT represents have voted in favour of striking. That is, I would argue, not, well, it isn't, an overwhelming majority, is it? Yes, I know Remainers are going to be screaming at their TV screens now. Yes, and a vote is a vote and a majority is a majority. I get all of that stuff. Stop going on at me. But let's be honest with you, one would have thought that if you were going to grind the country to a halt, I might be expecting a bit more than 52%. Gosh, I hate that number. Mick Lynch said that the vote shows members are determined to take further strike action in pursuit of a negotiated settlement. Well, joining me in the studio right now is a man I've got a bone to pick with, actually, but we'll leave that once we've done the important stuff. His travel editor at The Independent, it's Simon Calder. Simon, thank you very much. I'm going to put this out there. This is not an overwhelming number of people. If the pay was such a big deal for people, they're going to grind the country to a halt and cost us 30 million quid a day and ruin people's Christmas plans, it doesn't matter which way they tart this up. Only around 52% of people who the RMT represents have apparently voted in favour of a strike.
You say 52, I make it 55. But
no, I'll go with you. I'll go with you.
OK, but very roughly, just to do it in round numbers, 10,000 staff for Network Rail voted to strike. 6,000, again, in rough numbers, said we don't want to strike. And then probably...
And would have accepted this pay offer.
Yeah, and probably about 3,000 didn't vote at all.
OK.
So that's roughly what we're looking at. Now, in terms of the pay offer, it was, I think, and I'm not taking any sides in this, but looking at what the Unite Union and the Transport Salary Staff Association, the white collar union, have done, they basically just said, yes, probably about the best we're going to get, and
yes,
we'll go for that. Since it's been rejected by a majority, 52 or 55%, then there is no way that these strikes are going to end. So we're going to see the first cancellation in 18 minutes. It's the Sunderland to King's Cross in London at 5:30. That's the first of the cancellations. And they will now be continuing pretty much through till the 7th of January. We've got a 48-hour strike tomorrow and Wednesday. Then things are going to be largely disrupted on Thursday, another 48-hour strike Friday, Saturday. Then we're sort of into the season of rail engineering works, a strike from Christmas Eve to the 27th of December. And then once all the rail engineering stuff ends on the 2nd of January, the strikes start again on the 3rd of January.
But it's not just about money. As I was kept being told by various different union representatives, it's also about workers' conditions and job security. And as we understand it, this deal meant that there would be no compulsory job losses until 2025.
Yeah.
So when you look at it like that, it's the equivalent of, roughly speaking, a 9% pay rise. Roughly speaking, only 55% of the RMT union's members said that they didn't want to accept that. And it wasn't just about pay, it also guaranteed them work. A lot of people now will be going, you're ruining my Christmas over absolutely naff, or get back to work.
Well, OK, first of all, this is only part of the dispute, OK? And it's, I'm really sorry, quite complicated.
No.
Network Rail are the people who fix the tracks and, more to the point, keep the signals going.
Yes.
And that's why tomorrow you will see half the rail network just out of action. You can go in Wales, for example, from Cardiff to the Valleys or to Newport, no further. In Scotland, you're not going to be able to go north of Falkirk or Cowdenbeath. Cornwall completely cut off by rail. Some really key cities with no trains. So Portsmouth, Stoke-on-Trent, Swansea, Lincoln, Dundee, no trains. And that's going to be the pattern pretty much for a lot.
But look, just break it down for idiots like me, because you've got Network Rail, and that's had a massive impact that you've had there. But you mentioned some other unions.
Yeah, it's more actually the group. The RMT is the union that is pushing through all these strikes. It's by far the biggest rail union.
And that's Mick Lynch, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And staff for 14 train operators are also walking out, and there's tens of thousands of those. And the pay offer that they were offered, because they're a different group from Network Rail, was actually much, much worse than the Network Rail one. It was 4% plus 4%. Oh, and by the way, this is contingent upon you accepting so-called driver-only operation, which is absolute anathema. And that's why a lot of people think, hang on, this was a spanner lobbed in by the government at the last minute, either because they thought, oh, we can pull a fast one and get this through because they're desperate to settle, or more likely because they thought, no, we're going to take this.
But that's interesting, because a lot of the people, potentially anyway, at the RMT, of this 55% or so, who said that they still wanted to strike, might have been happy with this deal for them if they were represented by the Network Rail or worked for the Network Rail lot, but thought maybe out of solidarity for their other comrades, they voted against it because they got a worse offer.
Well, they certainly got a worse offer, but, I mean, the whole industry is now completely fragmented, which is why it's actually quite difficult to deal with. And there's lots of little local disputes going on here and there. So I think that when we finally get a settlement, it will look actually very much like the Network Rail settlement. So sort of 5%, with actually quite a lot of help for the lowest paid workers. So that will be above a 5% plus 4% increase for them. There's also a fabulous deal for family and friends, or actually family, not friends, of Network Rail staff who get loads of discounts on tickets.
So just to summarise, I know it's much more complicated than this, but again, in layman's terms, 55% of the RMT's eligible staff at the RMT have voted to continue their strike action, despite being offered a 5% pay rise backdated to the January just gone, a 4% pay rise from this January onwards, plus job security until 2025, and also a pretty generous offer when it comes to their family travelling as well.
Yeah.
Right. OK, all right. Well, people can make their own minds up about that, obviously. And the strike action, again, just a couple of quick dates on that.
OK, so starts tonight, effectively, wipes out Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, still quite a lot of trains running on intercity lines. Then Thursday, Friday, and then prepare for Christmas engineering works in the new year. You've got a bone to pick with
I do have a bone to pick with you. As you may be aware from an interview that we did last week, I was in Aberdeen this weekend.
Lovely, isn't it?
And I asked you outright on national television, Simon, my good man, friend of the show, friend of the channel, I said, will I be able to get back from Aberdeen? Because that might have altered my plans. I might have decided not to go because I care deeply about this job and I wouldn't want to lose it.
We wouldn't want you to miss it.
No, of course. And you told me, so categorically, that I would be able to.
Yeah, I certainly did, Yes.
Well, I spent 12 and a half hours on a sleeper train overnight and I'm 400 quid lighter.
Yeah, but you were lucky to get that.
No, I wasn't looking to get that.
You were.
This is absolutely... You told me I'd fly back.
Oh, I know, yeah. But anyway, you got back, which is... And a nation rejoices, Patrick. So that's the most important thing.
Yeah.
And now you send the bill, that 400 quid bill, to the airline and say...
Do I? Oh, yes, good.
You send it to them.
Okay.
Yeah, and they will have to pay it back because their job is to get you to London so that you can address the nation.
Address the nation, yeah.
And if they can't get you there on a plane... They've got to get you there the most efficient and quickest way they can, which in your case was £400 for an overnight sleeper.
Yes. Well, it's a non-sleeper, really, isn't it? Because it's just a normal seat on a train that takes all night. Yeah, I know. I know. My back is in bits. But look, thank you very much, Simon, and I won't hold you personally responsible.
I would if I were you. So
OK.
yeah.
All right. Take care, Simon. Always an absolute pleasure. Thank you very, very much. Simon Calder, that travel guru, travel expert, with us for some more advice. I mean, you can believe me if you want. I believed him, and look where it got me. It got me a bad back. But anyway, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Coming up, the army could be called in to drive ambulances as some health service staff prepare to strike. Will it actually happen? How do you feel about that? I imagine the army are a little bit miffed. And could disused and out-of-season holiday parks across the UK, oh, by the way, apparently as well some university accommodation, be a viable alternative to hotels to house Channel migrants? Lots to talk about when it comes to that, because people in those seaside towns who rely on the tourism, even if it's off-season, might not get a say in it. They won't get a say in it. And will it all just be for Christmas? It will not just be for Christmas, will it? It'll be over the summer as well. What do you make of all of this? I will be back in a moment. Don't you dare move.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Dubes & Co.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent.
That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Now, an emergency Cobra meeting has been held with ministers discussing what to do about the latest strikes. They're talking about using the military and civil servants to cover the staff shortages in the border force. Just one area that he's covering, isn't it? The government have also said the armed forces will be drafted in to help the NHS when ambulance staff go on strike next week. Whispers of a firefighter strike as well. Could the army be involved there? So how will the army react to being called in ahead of Christmas, or indeed over Christmas? I'm joined now by Philip Ingram MBE, who's a former senior military intelligence officer. Great to have you on the show. How will the army react to being drafted in to cover the jobs of people who are on better pay than them and are legally allowed to strike and probably have better working conditions as well?
Well, I was talking to the wife of a Lance Corporal in the Army only earlier, and she summed it up quite well in saying that within the military, better pay, better staffing levels, better working conditions are just a pipe dream of every service person everywhere. It's not the sort of thing that the military get. They get thrown in to deal with and pick up the detritus that's left by people who are paid better than them and are asking for better pay deals than them. And therefore it is, well, yet another holiday been given up at a time when defence is very busy indeed.
Well, can you enlighten me a little bit? I'm sorry if I'm putting you on the spot here, but I mean, it is relevant. The idea of army pay and in terms of pay rises as well, because I do cop it a lot from the old pro-nursing brigade. And yes, I'm very sorry to anyone who thinks that nurses should just be, you know, paid millions of pounds a year and held up as angels and clapped every single evening. They do great work. It's not about that. But they have had 2 pay rises in 2 years, and they amount to a real terms pay cut, as everyone keeps telling me. But, you know, no one predicted inflation and all of this stuff. What's the army pay rise has been like?
Army pay rise has been well below inflation. This year they got 3.75% for those on lower pay rates. Higher pay rates got 3.5%. A young soldier on training is on just over £16,000 a year. That's after the pay rise. And whenever they come out fully trained, they're on £21,425 per year. That's after the pay rise. That is significantly less than any of the other emergency service workers. Yeah. And I don't deny that they need more money, but it's putting it into context, and it's a bit of a kick in the guts where you've got people getting smaller pay rises imposed on them who can't represent. They've got no representation outside whatsoever, are having to fill these jobs over a holiday period.
No, indeed. And I don't just want to focus on the nurses. I mean, we have also just had members of the RMT, although only apparently 55% of them are actually voting to turn down what I think a lot of people regard as a relatively decent pay offer, not the decent pay offer, but job security for the next 3 years as well. I don't know about you, but I certainly would love job security for the next 3 years, although it's not going to happen. But there we go. When it comes to things like border force as well, now, forgive me, I don't want to, again, be slamming anyone who's, does a job, OK? But is it not slightly leave a bad taste in the mouth that people who essentially check passports for a living, or in the case of what's been going on in the Channel actively don't, can go on strike and ruin people's Christmases, but people who will actually fight and die for this country, who are on maybe in some cases less than half the amount of money they're on, have to spend Christmas at Heathrow?
Well, border force, they don't just check passports. They are the front line of the security of people coming in, of people coming into the country. So they've got an awful lot more to do. And I wouldn't knock their professionalism and all the rest of it. But it's what we're seeing at the moment is a perfect storm. And if we look at what's going on across Europe, we listen to the unions, we listen to certain politicians, and they seem to think that everything is down to the government, when actually there are similar issues happening in every country across Europe and lots of countries across the world. And we have to start to ask the question why. And we keep hearing Ukraine coming up, and that is one of the major causes of the economic woes that we're in at the moment. But this level of disruption that we're seeing and disintegration of public services across the country. If I was Vladimir Putin sitting in Moscow, I'd be sitting there behind my big oak desk at the moment with a white cat on my knee, stroking it and smiling, going that the UK is doing everything to itself that I would like to be doing myself. People need to realise that they should look after things from a collective perspective.
Yeah,
not
the irony there, of course, is there was a report last week which garnered rather a lot of attention, which did purport to anyway have links between the RMT and the British Communist Party and indeed the Kremlin. Of course, all of those were, well, they're not denied actually, because literally one of them is bang involved with the Communist Party. But just to paraphrase what you were saying there, do you think that the strike action that we're going to be seeing, so nurses, paramedics, etc., ambulance workers, rail workers, posties, whoever else. In your view, do you actually think that's helping Vladimir Putin?
Oh, hugely. 100% is helping him. He will be laughing all the way to the bank over this because of the disruption that it's causing. We're seeing our service personnel who are trying to be in the front line and make sure that Ukrainian recruits are trained properly, are trying to be a deterrent in Estonia and elsewhere, and deployed in the Navy and the Air Force. The Air Force are flying on a daily basis to keep fighter air patrols around NATO's borders the whole time. All of that is going to be degraded by the fact that service personnel are having to stand in for a lot of these other people who are much better paid than them.
Yeah, now, again, not diminishing whatsoever the role, the fantastic work that paramedics and nurses, etc. do, but do people in the armed forces look at their pleas when they're saying we are overstretched and overworked and we have to work in grim conditions every single day and we hold lives in the palm of our hands? Do people in the armed forces look at that and go, actually, you don't know you're born?
No, they don't, because it's not a competition. Our nurses are overworked, our paramedics are overworked, our police are overworked, our border force staff are overworked. I'm not going to talk about the train staff because I actually don't think they are, as a regular train user. Our service personnel are overworked, but the answer isn't going out on strike. That is using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The answer is to sit down and talk and negotiate, and work out things from an adult perspective. Our police can't go on strike. Our service personnel can't go on strike. Yet it seems as if everyone else who can is just doing it. And surprise, surprise, it always seems to happen over a holiday period. It never seems to happen, at other times of the year, and that makes me just a little cynical.
Yeah, OK, I'm inclined to agree with you on that one. Philip Ingram, thank you very, very much. Former senior military intelligence officer. Right, now, lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the RMT's rejection of the latest pay offer. OK, I'm going to do my best to whiz you through it as we understand it. It came through to me live on air, right? So here we go. As I understand it, 55% of the RMT's representatives, so the workers, I suppose, the RMT represents, have apparently reportedly voted against a pay offer that would have had their pay backdated to January at around 5%, and then, of course, around a 4% pay increase as well from January onwards. John says there is no magic money tree, but it's clear that unions don't understand that. The reality is any excessive wage increase just makes for even higher inflation and or tax increases. Jason says, thank God the army is coming in. At least it will work better. These crazy increases these unions are after are a disgrace. Jill says these rail workers are deluded. They are losing more money by striking than they will receive in pay rises over the next 3 years. Yeah, what also is fascinating is the job security element of it as well, which apparently means that for the next 3 years there are going to be no compulsory redundancies, no compulsory job losses, which I know a lot of people were up in arms about. So this deal, supposedly, as we're reading it, I'm sure the unions will pick it apart themselves, but as I understand it anyway, from the information that's come through to me, would have secured jobs for 3 years, would also have meant that there would have been a pay increase in the grand total of around 9% over a 2-year period. Of course, that's not in line with inflation, but I don't know, is your wage going up in line with inflation? People might note with some interest as well that apparently every single day that this lot are on strike, it costs us around 30 million. Maybe that's even more over the busy Christmas period because people would normally be going out and about or travelling more over Christmas. I don't know, but there you go. And actually, when only... Is it only? Some people might be going, well, hang on a minute, 55%, it's still a majority. Yeah, OK, I'd take on board that. But I don't know, would you have thought that maybe more than 55% of RMT staff, as it were, RMT people that are represented by the RMT, more than 55% would have voted against the pay offer? What does that really tell you? GBViews at gbnews.uk. We are going to be picking that apart throughout the course of the show. But with me next, we're going to be talking about reports that the government is to use holiday camps to accommodate asylum seekers as a cheaper option to putting them up in hotels. Yeah, that's right. We're all going on a migrant holiday. Is this a good thing or a bad idea? I want to hear from you on all of that. What next, people? The Ritz. And they also say, don't they, oh, well, it'll save money on hotels. No, it won't. They must think we're absolute mugs. It's costing us roughly £6 million a day to put these people in hotels. They are still going to be in hotels, OK? They're still going to be in hotels. We're just also using holiday camps and potentially university halls of residence as well. And what? We think that's just going to be for a week, is it? What happened to them only staying in hotels for a week? Shock horror, they're still there. So it just means more accommodation. They go, well, it'll only be in the off-season. Well, it won't just be in the off-season, will it? No, because they'll still be there come summertime as well. This problem is not going away anytime soon. What do you think? Do you live in a rural area where these holiday camps are going to be used? Do you think that actually is going to affect tourism? Think it's going to affect jobs? What do you make of all of that? And also as well, I had a guest on earlier on. who made the rather salient point that, not only were hotels and our hotels good for just local economies and local businesses, but a lot of kind of normal working class people holiday in this country would go to these holiday camps, presumably now will not be allowed. And by the way, if the deal that the Home Office is offering these holiday camps is anything like the deal that they're offering Holiday Inns, then they will promise them a full refurb afterwards, which we will be paying for. So we will not just be paying for the accommodation, we will not just be paying for the inconvenience, we will not just be paying in a roundabout way for the knock-on effects of the loss to our local economy. No, you, my friend, you will be paying to renovate a holiday camp as well. But before all of that, it's your latest headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories on GB News. As you've been hearing, rail strikes will continue into the Christmas period after members of the RMT union rejected the latest pay offer on the table. 63% of the union's members turned down a deal offered by Network Rail of a 5% pay rise this year, then on top of that, a 4% rise in 2023. Now, 2 48-hour strikes will go ahead, and passengers are being warned to expect delays and cancellations tomorrow and Wednesday, as well as on Friday and Saturday. Government ministers have held an emergency COBRA meeting in a bid to minimise disruption during the industrial action across a number of public sectors. And ambulance staff, as well as a number of NHS workers in Scotland, have called off their strike action following their acceptance of a pay deal with the Scottish Government. 2 unions, Unite and Unison, say an average of 62% of their members backed the pay offer on the table. For the lowest paid, it would mean an 11.3% pay rise with an average of 7.5% for everybody. But our top story today on GB News is that 3 young boys have died after falling through an icy lake in Solihull yesterday. Police say the children, who were aged between 8 and 11 years old, were in cardiac arrest when they were pulled from the icy water in Kingshurst. A 4th boy, we understand, aged 6, remains in a critical condition in hospital, and 1 police officer has been released from hospital following treatment for hypothermia after trying to punch his way through the ice to reach the children. That's all from me. More at the top of the hour.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by 2 of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Mark Stein. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton Tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel. OK, ladies and gentlemen, now I know this story is going to get you all going. No, you are not dreaming. The only way we thought the Channel Migrant Crossing thing could have got worse is actually if we started putting them in, I don't know, university halls of residence or places like Butlins or holiday camps. Oh, my gosh, it's happening. Shock horror, to the surprise of absolutely nobody. Now, on many occasions on this show, we, of course, do discuss the very real challenges that the government is facing to house these tens of thousands of migrants who cross the Channel and they come to the UK. They've put peoples in hotels. They've put them in various different places, even people in private rental stock. It's costing us somewhere in the region of £6 million per day, although, of course, like everything, that figure is very misleading because it's actually a lot more than that when you add in various things like cleaning costs and food, etc, etc, etc. Well, it's been reported that the government is now expected to announce plans to use holiday camps and university halls of residence as cheaper options to accommodate the asylum seekers. That, I will just say it, is an absolute whopper in a long list of total whopping lies that we've been told, because it may well be cheaper to house them in camps and in university halls of residence, but we're not going to stop housing them in hotels either, are we? So it's actually a kind of 2-for-1 of regret that we're getting here, ladies and gents. And look, we're going to pick apart the absolute farce that this is, but I'm joined now by Dr. Rakib Hassan, who's a social policy analyst. Dr. Rakib, thank you very much. I can see next to no issues when it comes to the idea now that a load of migrants are going to be dumped in a university halls of residence when Freshers' Week rolls around and a load of 18-year-old girls wearing potentially not that much, who have maybe had one too many. We are sleepwalking into disaster, are we not?
Well, I think that it reeks of desperation, if truth be told, Patrick. The government's plans to rehome Channel migrants in old student accommodation and off-season disused holiday camps. They're trying to sell it as if it is going to be cheaper, but the reality is we're spending £5.8 million a day, according to some sources, on housing Channel migrants in hotels. So if it was marginally cheaper than that, the government would be correct. But to be honest, it's still an eye-watering figure, especially in the middle of a cost of living crisis.
It is. And they don't tell you about the cost of the refurb. Now, I happen to know for a straightforward matter of fact, because it's somewhere very close to where I live, and I was all over this story since the day it started, about the Holiday Inn in Maidenhead. I know for a fact that a full refurb has been offered there as part of this package. So one would assume that is par for the course, and in fact we know it from other areas. So it'd be remarkable if a full refurb wasn't being offered to either, disused university halls, they will become brand spanking new university halls as and when this lot decide that they are going to be moved into British society, similar with these holiday camps, etc. So in the round, Rakib, it's not going to save us any money at all. But in your specific brief as social policy analyst, I read with some interest the comments of a particular councillor in Lancaster to say that it is inevitable that there will be conflict when it comes to people in these hotels and the local community. Do you think that conflict is inevitable?
Well, I think that the current situation is placing a great deal of strain on social cohesion. I was saying that the situation in regards to hotels, it was ultimately depriving established local communities of potentially a crucial hub of social interaction. And I think that when we're looking at the situation where we're looking at the government now using disused holiday camps, old forms of student accommodation. There's also talk about using old military bases and airfields. Some people may well ask, well, why can't you reconvert these facilities to rehome homeless people, including people who have previously served in our military?
Look, I'm almost sick of saying it now, and I just feel like I'm banging a broken drum. Homeless military veterans, just the homeless in general, people who are fleeing domestic abuse. I mean, the list goes on, especially when it comes to the cold weather. One of the arguments as well about these disused or old military barracks is I believe that some asylum seekers actually set one on fire not so long ago because they weren't particularly happy with the conditions there. So I hope they've done an upgrade there, and then maybe they will actually be happy with it. But in terms of, as well, the local economy, Rakib, these local holiday camps often used by, you know, British working-class people, or anyone, really, I don't want to stereotype too much, but let's be honest, who go there and enjoy the facilities on offer there. That presumably won't be happening if it's full of asylum seekers. People will lose their jobs there as well. The local area will suffer economically as a result of this. And that, I would imagine, won't do anything for social cohesion either.
Well, I've always made the point that there's many things that should be done to create more family-friendly facilities in our local communities. But it feels like to me that these potential facilities are increasingly being taken up to rehome channel migrants, people who are ultimately entering the country illegally. And I have to say that from a social cohesion perspective, that's far from ideal, because it's absolutely it's a situation which is not sustainable, and the government may well think that these plans to put illegal migrants in these facilities instead of hotels, that might reduce criticism of the government, and they'll try and set it off as this is financially more sensible. But I don't think that's really going to work out well at all.
No, I agree with you. Rakib, thank you very much. Dr. Rakib Ostan there is social policy analyst. I'm very pleased now, though, to have a particular chat joining me in the studio. It is political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt. David, is the government just rearranging the decking on the Titanic?
I sometimes think that with policies like this, the government is seeing how far they can push it, how ludicrous the situation can be, how utterly absurd the suggestion before people are in uproar. It's sort of like end-of-term fever. They're seeing if they can stick a potato up the exhaust pipe. It's an absolutely ridiculous suggestion. We cannot afford this. And moreover, we should not be doing it to begin with. The fundamental problem here is that we should and must leave the ECHR, the European Convention on Human Rights. Last year, 3/4 or more of the migrants coming here were able-bodied young men under the age of 40. They're here to work, apparently, but they're here illegally in the first instance. We shouldn't be paying for this. It is not fair that at the time of a cost-of-living crisis, with inflation rampant, with people increasingly unable to afford food and basics like energy and their mortgage payments, that the foreign aid budget, which is paid for out of our taxation, is being used to house these people.
I mean, just over the course of this show so far, I have spoken about us not having enough funding to grit the roads, OK? That's caused massive travel disruption. We've got the strikes. A lot of the strikes in a lot of different sectors fundamentally centres around pay, bit on working conditions, mostly about pay. We've got cost of living crisis. I've also done the inflation figures and GDP, etc. None of that is a particularly pretty picture. And then in the same breath, I'm expected to sit here and just roll over and accept that we've got all the money in the world when it comes to housing people who decided to come here illegally and, let's be honest with you, are not fleeing war. It's a tough sell.
I mean, why, for instance, is Albania not on the white list, that is to say on the list that is clearly not of people fleeing war, fleeing conflict? As you made the point earlier, we have a massive problem with homelessness. Anyone who walks around any major city, London, Birmingham, Edinburgh, Leeds, will see this, and it's crippling for social cohesion. Why on earth should Britons be sleeping on the streets in temperatures which we've had for a week now of -3 at night, if these facilities are available? I mean, it's morally repugnant, frankly, that we should be prioritising other people over the needs of Britons, and particularly ex-servicemen and women fleeing domestic violence.
Yeah, look, 100%. Another angle on this, which I think really does go under the radar, and for the life of me I can't understand why, is people from a variety of different cultures around the world. Now, we already have massive net migration, legal migration. We already do rather well when it comes to the old student visas as well. And very often these people come from places that do not necessarily share our values when it comes to things like gay rights, when it comes to things like women's rights, etc. Different cultural norms. A lot of that centres around religious fundamentalism in some cases as well. Now, dare I say it, something similar happens when it comes to people coming across the Channel as well. Is there an irony here that a lot of the old refugees welcome in the Rainbow Banner Brigade are willingly encouraging the importation of people who perhaps do not share our cultural norms. And even the Church of England, they might one day live to regret the, one love aspect when it comes to people coming over here who don't believe in things like gay rights and women's rights.
I have to say, it takes a particular kind of stupidity to attend a Palestinian rights demonstration waving a rainbow flag, a country where homosexuals are routinely murdered. I think this is one of the poisonous legacies of Blairism, that we were not allowed for 20 years to talk about these kinds of things without being accused of being essentially racist, of wanting all foreigners to be got rid of. When there are such serious concerns, and you only have to look at the many times in the north where there were problems which were brushed under the carpet. Now, yes, it is desperately silly to think that there will not be the potential for these sorts of things to happen again, given, as you say, the cultural backgrounds, the totally different sets of cultural norms that a lot of these people bring with them. And I would say that the first duty of the government in an instance like this is to ensure that our people are safe, and that means that our students can go about their undergraduate years finding their feet as adults without the danger of attack if they're gay or rape if they're women.
100%, and this is an accident waiting to happen. The whole thing is a catastrophe waiting to happen. I do not want to find a situation where I'm sitting here reporting on things like massive local protests that, let's be honest, would have the potential to be turned nasty or to be hijacked by a genuine racist, by the way, as a result of something happening. A young university girl who's gone on a night out, maybe not had a track record of... She's just left home, she's enjoyed one too many on a freshers' night or something like that, maybe not wearing too much, stumbling across, something happens. Or something happens at one of these hotels, local communities, as you've said. I do not want to end up reporting on that because of the obvious connotations that would be attached to it. But I can see it happening. I can see there being massive civil unrest.
I should say it's inevitable. When you take large groups of young men, able-bodied young men, lots of energy, lots of vim...
Who don't get it as well, who don't get our social norms.
Nor do they care for it, even if they do get it. They've obviously got a great deal of energy to get here in the first place. So it's inevitable that there is going to be a clash. And I do not think that any reasonable government should be allowing that situation even to be considered, never mind to come to pass.
Well, you could argue even to come to pass, or causing it might be another way of saying it, but I wouldn't possibly put those words in your mouth. Thank you very much. Great to have you on the show.
Patrick.
It's the first time, I think, but won't be the last. Anyway, thank you very much. Right, so that was, of course, political commentator David Oldroyd-Bolt there. What did you make of that? I imagine the views are coming in thick and fast, people. But yes, moving away from that big breaking news that we had earlier, we're rolling it over because the government ministers have held an emergency Cobra meeting, which has just concluded, as they discuss ways to deal with the upcoming strike action within the NHS and on our railways. The Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, Oliver Dowden, who chaired that Cobra meeting, had this to say just a matter of moments ago about RMT members rejecting the latest pay deal.
We listened to the independent pay review bodies and we honoured what they asked for in respect of the nurses and others. I don't think it's fair and reasonable to try and bypass that process through strikes, particularly at a time when we're facing the challenges, whether that's COVID, Russia-Ukraine, or as winter bites. And in respect of the RMT, I would say the same thing. Families are struggling right now. Do the fair and reasonable thing and call off those strikes.
Yes, well, there we go. There is more to come, though, because the Rail Minister, Hugh Merriman, also outlined the government response to the ongoing strikes.
The government is working incredibly hard across all departments to ensure that there is mitigation in place to look after people during these strikes. But we have to be very clear. The government can't take down the strikes. We can only bring in mitigating factors to reduce the impact. So my message is to the trade unions. Please take down these damaging strike actions. Please recognise what the pay rises would do to inflation if they were to be accepted, and recognise that inflation hits the poorest hardest.
Well, it's taken a long time, and it is a lot more complicated than just the RMT being involved and just Network Rail being involved. But finally now, we do actually know what one of the offers has been, at least, and exactly what the RMT and their members have rejected. But crucially as well, how many of their members rejected it. The RMT's top brass, Mick Lynch, says the government aren't lifting a finger to prevent the strike action. Network Rail, and this is where it gets interesting, had offered a 5% pay rise for this year, backdated to January, with another 4% at the start of 2023 and a guarantee of no compulsory job losses until January 2025. 63.9% of the 83% of the union's members who voted to reject that offer. But if you take that in the round, that means around 55% of the union's representatives decided that they didn't want to accept that offer. is that a lower number than you would have thought? There'll be more on this across GB News throughout the course of this evening. But, gosh, you've only got time to breathe on this show. We are going to move on now and talk about something... Actually, in a way, it makes me wish that I wasn't breathing anymore. But anyway, there we go. The next 3 episodes of Harry and Meghan's Netflix docuseries are going to be released. And at first glance, it seems the final 3 episodes are far more controversial based on the latest trailer. I get to now, along with you, lucky us, have a quick glance at this trailer. Come on, let's do it.
I wasn't being thrown to the wolves, I was being fed to the wolves.
They were actively recruiting people to disseminate disinformation.
They were happy to lie to protect my brother. They were never willing to tell the truth to protect us.
Royal commentator Michael Cole joins me now. Should we strip them of their titles? Get them stripped.
Patrick, I've seen it 3 times. I think I'm going to recover. He starts off by talking about a flight to freedom. Well, as if he was on the last helicopter out of Saigon in 1975. In fact, he was on a private jet with Meghan and their son, going to a beautiful house in beautiful British Columbia. There's a lot of paranoia. It's 71 seconds of vitriol and venom and princely paranoia, which is really not very good to see. And there's a lot of mention of they. They don't say who they is. They apparently told lies on behalf of Prince William, but they were not prepared to tell the truth to protect me. I mean,
I'm willing to suspend my judgment when it comes to whether or not they actually name and shame, because they have to at some point. And maybe this is just a way of teasing it, as you and I are now both talking about who could they be. Let's tune in to find out. But when it comes to Prince Harry potentially throwing his brother under the bus a bit as well, accusing them of institutional gaslighting. I mean, what do you make of that? Do you think this is actually... Are we at the point now, Michael, of actually someone going round and knocking on Prince Harry's door and putting him in a straitjacket?
Well, that's a clinical decision that I can't make. But I know that Gaslight was a famous play and film in which a woman is treated very cruelly by her husband so that she thinks that she's going mad. But I think the people who are really going mad are the people who are having watched this. That's us, the audience. What does institutional gaslighting in a royal context actually mean? It's really bizarre, the whole thing. And it's another self-pitying episode setting up. Of course it's glib, of course it's glossy, of course it's slick, and it's setting it up. Don't forget, Patrick, what this is all about is ratings. It's a commercial organisation, and Meghan and Harry have sold their souls to Netflix.
Well, they have, and they'll probably come to regret it. I think it's a catastrophic miscalculation that's been reflected by even The Guardian apparently giving it 3 stars, and you would have thought that Meghan would have read that and wept. They can't accuse The Guardian, of all people, can they, of being institutionally racist or against them? Michael Cole, thank you very much, royal commentator. Right, Michelle Dewberry is up next with Jubes and Co. Jubes, what's on?
Hello, Patrick. I'll tell you what's not on. I won't be picking up your conversation there about Harry and Meghan. It's an H&M free zone again tonight, but what I will be talking about is strikes. Of course, how involved should the government be when it comes to these negotiations, more or less? I've also got a solution. Some of the NHS's woes, the Health Secretary can have that one for free on me. I want to talk about post-Brexit Britain. Who should we be doing trade deals with? And apparently, some civil servants have been told, Patrick, don't call your Christmas parties, call them instead festivities or whatever, holiday things, so that you don't offend people. I've got a simple message. If you're offended by a Christmas party, don't go.
Yeah, I'm more offended by the stuff that happens at a Christmas party, not what it's actually called.
Hey, what goes on at a Christmas party stays in a Christmas party, Patrick.
Oh, if only that were true. Michelle, thank you very much. Michelle Dewberry there, Jubes and Co. That's coming your way next. Make sure you tune into that. It's always absolutely box office. Today will be no different. Oh, cheeky little plug, by the way. I am covering for Mark Stein later, 8 till 9, and we've got an absolute bumper show for you. We are going to be talking about the latest reveal when it comes to grooming gangs. Do not want to miss that. I know it's a hot topic for you as well. Also, is Islamism actually infiltrating our education system? And loads more. GBNews, GBNews.uk. Michelle Dewberry will be on very shortly.
Good evening, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. The cold weather will continue through this week. Ice and frost will be prevalent, and the potential for a bit more snow in some areas. The UK is kind of surrounded by low pressure systems, but not really having a direct hit on the UK. We're just staying in the cold conditions with snow showers around the edges, but some heavy snow falling at the moment across Shetland, and the snow showers will work into the mainland of northern Scotland overnight. Across the southeast, where we had the snow last night, could be really quite icy here. Elsewhere, most places dry, some misty, murky conditions persisting over central areas, but many places clear, and that will lead it to turn cold, -5, -6, even in some towns and cities, negative double figures across Scotland, perhaps as low as -20 in some locations. More snow showers coming in here as well, so ice and snow is a risk in the morning over northern Scotland, still potentially icy across the southeast first thing, and then a few showers just drift into southeast Scotland, northeast England later on. They could have some snow mixed in. Otherwise, a largely dry day, reasonably bright, but temperatures again struggling to get much above freezing. It will feel cold, particularly as the winds pick up in the southwest. Now, here we are looking at some wet weather just pushing in during the course of Tuesday evening. This will be a mixture of rain, sleet and snow. Difficult to say how far in it's going to get and therefore how much snow we are going to see, but there could be some across the southwest during Tuesday night and into Wednesday morning. Potentially icy here again then on Wednesday morning. Further snow showers coming in across northern Scotland, and a few more just coming down the east coast of England as well. Snow at low levels. We could see a few centimetres of snow and more than that over the hills, but they will be very hit and miss. Again, for most places, it's dry on Wednesday. Largely sunny conditions, but cold, with the wind accentuating the cold, particularly across northern parts of Scotland. So it's staying cold this week. We do have warnings in place. See the Met Office website for more details on those.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB+,